Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been hauling freight across the Deep South for 17 years. Most of that time I spent on I-10 and I-20. Moving pallets of plywood and rolled steel between distribution centers that all look the same. Concrete bays, yellow forklifts, guys in safety vests who never make eye contact. The work doesn't change much, and I like it that way. Predictable routes, predictable people, predictable problems. But every now and then, dispatch throws you something that doesn't fit the pattern. Something that makes you second-guess the job, the route, and whether you should have just told them no. That's what happened the first week of September 2023. I was finishing up a run to Baton Rouge when my phone buzzed. Text from dispatch. Short and direct, the way Hoyt Brammer always sent them. Luther, need you southbound. Pick up in Terrebonne Parish. Chemical supplies. Night run. You good? I stared at the message for a minute, thumb hovering over the screen. Night runs through the bayou weren't my favorite, but the pay was better, and I needed to cover some repairs on the trailer hitch. I typed back, "Yeah, I'm good. Send the address." The pickup point was a warehouse off Route 311, about 40 minutes south of Thibodaux. I'd been through that area once or twice before, but never after dark. The roads down there are narrow, poorly lit, and surrounded by swamp on both sides. No shoulder to speak of, just blacktop and water. You stay focused or you end up in a ditch with gators circling your cab. I rolled out around 7 p.m., just as the sun was starting to sink below the tree line. The sky had that bruised look to it, purple and gray, with clouds stacking up in the west like something heavy was coming. The radio mentioned storms later, but nothing severe. I figured I'd be loaded and back on the interstate before it hit. The warehouse was exactly where they said it'd be. A low, rusted building surrounded by chain link and floodlights that barely worked. Two guys in coveralls loaded the pallets without saying much. I signed the paperwork, checked the straps, and got back on the road. The load wasn't especially heavy, maybe 12,000 pounds, but it was chemical-grade material, which meant I had to be careful with the turns. No hard braking, no sudden stops. I pulled out onto Route 311 and headed north, planning to cut back toward I-10 through a series of parish roads that would shave off about 20 minutes. That's when the rain started. It didn't ease in. It just came down all at once, like someone flipped a switch. The kind of rain that turns your windshield into a wall of water even with the wipers on full blast. I slowed down to about 35, leaning forward in my seat, trying to see past the hood. The road was slick, reflecting my headlights in long, wavering streaks. I passed a boarded-up gas station, a rusted mailbox leaning into the ditch, and a handmade sign that said Fresh Boudin, nailed to a telephone pole. Then nothing. Just trees and water and the hiss of rain hammering the roof. About 10 miles in, I saw the turnoff for Blackwater Bridge. It wasn't marked on my GPS, but I remembered it from a conversation I'd had with another driver a few months back. He'd mentioned it as a shortcut, a 2-lane bridge that crossed over a wide section of the bayou and cut straight through to Highway 1. I hesitated for a second, then took the turn. The road narrowed almost immediately. The trees closed in on both sides, their branches scraping against the trailer like fingernails on metal. The asphalt was cracked and uneven, and I could feel every pothole through the steering wheel. I started to regret the detour, but I was already committed. Turning around wasn't an option, not with a full load and barely enough room to maneuver. The bridge appeared about a mile later. At first, I almost didn't see it. The rain was so thick it looked like a shadow, a dark smudge against the slightly lighter gray of the sky. Then my headlights caught the metal framework, and I realized what I was looking at. Blackwater Bridge was old. Really old. The kind of structure that should have been replaced decades ago, but somehow still stood because nobody wanted to pay for a new one. It was a narrow span, maybe 30 feet wide, with rusted steel girders rising up on either side like ribs. The surface was wooden planks, not asphalt, and I could see gaps between them where the water below reflected my lights. I stopped the truck about 50 feet short of the entrance and sat there, engine idling, wipers slapping back and forth. Every instinct I had told me to turn around, but the road behind me was just as bad as the road ahead, and I didn't want to spend the next hour trying to back this rig through a flooded ditch. I put it in gear and eased forward, feeling the wooden planks creak and shift under the weight of the truck. The sound was louder than the rain, a deep, groaning noise that seemed to come from the bridge itself, like it was protesting my presence. Halfway across, my headlights caught something up ahead. A car parked sideways across the bridge, blocking both lanes. It was an older sedan, maybe a late 90s Buick, dark green with a dented rear fender. The driver's side door was open, and the interior light was on, casting a pale yellow glow across the wet planks. I hit the brakes and the truck shuddered to a stop. I sat there for a moment, staring at the car, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The engine was off, no hazard lights, no one standing nearby. Just an empty car in the middle of a bridge, in the middle of a storm, in the middle of nowhere. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and stepped out into the rain. The wind hit me immediately, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of wet wood and stagnant water. I walked toward the car, my boots making hollow thuds on the planks. The rain was so loud I couldn't hear anything else, not the river below, not the wind in the trees, just the endless roar of water hitting metal and wood and mud. I reached the driver's side door and shined the light inside. The seat was soaked. The steering wheel was turned hard to the left, and the keys were still in the ignition. On the passenger seat, I saw a purse, a cell phone, and a pair of glasses folded neatly on top of a folded map. I called out, my voice barely audible over the storm. "Hello? Anyone here?" No answer. I walked around to the other side, checked the back seat. Empty. I looked over the edge of the bridge down into the water below. It was black and fast-moving, churning around the support beams with a violence that made my stomach tighten. If someone had gone into that water, they weren't coming back out. Not alive, anyway. I went back to the car and tried the phone. Dead. The battery icon showed nothing, just a blank screen. I pocketed it anyway, figuring I'd hand it over to someone later, assuming I ever found someone to hand it to. I stood there for a moment, rain dripping off my jacket, trying to decide what to do. The smart move would have been to call the police, but I had no signal. The next smart move would have been to push the car out of the way, but it was in neutral and too heavy to move by hand. That left one option. I had to drive around it. The bridge was narrow, but there was just enough room on the left side to squeeze past if I went slow. I climbed back into the cab, shifted into first gear, and inched forward. My right mirror cleared the car by maybe 6 inches. My left tires were less than a foot from the edge of the bridge, and I could feel the planks shifting under me, bending slightly with each rotation of the wheels. I kept my eyes forward, hands locked on the wheel, breathing through my nose. One wrong move and I'd be over the side, taking 12,000 pounds of chemical supplies with me. I made it past the car and kept going, exhaling hard once I was clear. The rest of the bridge stretched out ahead of me, maybe another 100 feet. I could see the far side now, where the road picked up again and disappeared into the trees. I was almost there. Then I glanced in my rearview mirror, just a quick look to make sure the trailer was tracking straight. That's when I saw it. The car wasn't empty anymore. Someone was sitting in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead, hands on the wheel. A woman, I think, though I couldn't see her face clearly. Just the shape of her, motionless, framed by the dim glow of the interior light. I hit the brakes without thinking. The truck lurched to a stop, and I twisted around in my seat, staring back through the rain-streaked rear window. The car was still there, but the driver's seat was empty again. Just the open door, swinging slightly in the wind. I sat there, breathing hard, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection, something my tired brain had conjured up out of shadows and rain. But I didn't believe it. Not really. I put the truck back in gear and got off that bridge as fast as I dared. The moment my tires hit solid ground on the other side, I floored it, not caring about the load or the straps or the rain. I just wanted distance. I drove for another 10 minutes before I found a wide spot in the road and pulled over. I sat there with the engine running, hands shaking, staring at the dashboard. The clock said 9:47 p.m. I'd been on that bridge for less than 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. I pulled out the phone I'd taken from the car and tried it again. Still dead. I set it on the passenger seat and rubbed my face, trying to think. I needed to report this. The car, the empty seat, the woman I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. But I didn't have a signal, and I didn't know where the nearest police station was. I decided to keep driving, find a town, find someone who could make sense of what I'd just witnessed. I merged back onto the road and headed north, keeping my speed steady, my eyes forward. I didn't look in the rearview mirror again. Not once. About 15 miles up the road, I passed a sign for a town called Greystone. Population 340. I took the exit and followed the main street until I found a gas station with lights on. It was a small place, 2 pumps and a building that looked like it used to be someone's house. I parked the truck off to the side and walked inside. The clerk was an older man, maybe 60, with gray hair and a saint's cap pulled low over his eyes. He looked up when I came in, nodded once, and went back to his magazine. "Excuse me," I said, walking up to the counter. "I need to use a phone. Mine's dead, and I just came from Blackwater Bridge. There's a car out there, abandoned. I think someone might be in trouble." The man looked at me, his expression unreadable. He set the magazine down slowly, folded his hands on the counter, and said, "You crossed Blackwater Bridge tonight?" I nodded. "Yeah, about 20 minutes ago. There was a car blocking the road, driver's side door open, no one inside, but I think I saw someone." The man stared at me for a long moment. Then he reached under the counter and pulled out an old rotary phone, the kind with a cord that coiled like a spring. He set it in front of me and said, "You can use this. But before you call anyone, you should know something. That bridge, it's got a history. People see things out there, things that don't make sense. You're not the first driver to come through here with a story like yours, and you won't be the last." I picked up the phone, my hand hovering over the dial. "What kind of history?" I asked. The man leaned back, crossing his arms. "The kind folks don't like to talk about. You want my advice? Make your call, get back on the road, and don't come back through here after dark." I dialed the number for the local sheriff's office, and as the phone rang, I glanced out the window at my truck, still idling under the floodlights. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the night felt heavier than it should have. Like the air itself was holding its breath. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. A woman's voice, calm and professional, with just a hint of a southern drawl. "Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's Office. This is Deputy Rigsby. How can I help you?" I cleared my throat, suddenly aware of how shaky my voice sounded. "Yeah, hi. My name's Luther Caldwell. I'm a truck driver, and I just came across Blackwater Bridge en route. I don't even know what route it is. There's an abandoned car out there. Green Buick, older model. Driver's door open, keys in the ignition. I think someone might need help." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear papers rustling, maybe a keyboard clicking. "Blackwater Bridge," she repeated, her tone shifting slightly. "You said the car was abandoned. Did you see anyone in the area?" I hesitated, thinking about the figure I'd seen in the rearview mirror, or thought I'd seen. "No," I said finally. "No one around. But the car looked like it had been left in a hurry. Purse still inside, phone, glasses. It didn't feel right." Deputy Rigsby was quiet for another moment. Then she said, "All right, Mr. Caldwell. Can you give me your current location?" I glanced at the clerk, who was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm at a gas station in Greystone, off Highway 1. She made a sound of acknowledgement. "Stay there. I'll be out in about 20 minutes. Don't go back to the bridge. You understand?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, I understand." I hung up the phone and looked at the clerk. He hadn't moved, his arms still crossed, his eyes fixed on me. "She tell you to stay put?" he asked. I nodded again. "Yeah?" He grunted, a sound that could have been approval or something else entirely. "Good. You don't want to be out there after dark, not around that bridge." I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from the last hour was wearing off, leaving me hollow and jittery. "What's the story?" I asked. "With the bridge, I mean. You said people see things. What kind of things?" The clerk looked at me for a long time, like he was deciding how much to say. Finally, he reached under the counter again and pulled out a faded newspaper clipping, yellowed with age and protected by a plastic sleeve. He slid it across the counter toward me. The headline read, "3 Missing After Bridge Incident. Search Continues." The date was August 12, 1987. The article was short, maybe 4 paragraphs, describing how a family of 3, a mother and her 2 daughters, had disappeared after their car was found abandoned on Blackwater Bridge during a severe storm. The vehicle had been discovered by a passing motorist, engine still running, doors locked from the inside. No sign of the occupants. The search had gone on for weeks, involving divers, dogs, and volunteers from 3 parishes. They never found anything. No bodies, no clothing, no trace. It was like they'd vanished into the air. I looked up at the clerk. This was almost 40 years ago. He nodded. "That's right. And since then, people have been seeing things out there. Mostly at night, mostly during storms. Cars that shouldn't be there. Figures standing on the bridge. Lights in the water. Some folks say it's the family, still looking for a way home. Others say it's something else, something that was there long before that bridge was ever built." I slid the clipping back across the counter. "You believe that?" He shrugged. "I believe what I've seen, and I've seen enough to know that bridge isn't a place you want to linger." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the window. A patrol car pulled into the lot, its light bar dark but its engine rumbling low. The clerk nodded toward the door. "That'll be Rigsby. She's good people. Tell her what you saw. She'll take it from there." I walked outside, the rain now reduced to a light mist that hung in the air like a veil. The patrol car's door opened and a woman stepped out. Deputy Maeve Rigsby was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and a no-nonsense expression that reminded me of every competent professional I'd ever worked with. She wore a standard sheriff's uniform, dark green with a badge on the chest and a utility belt that looked like it had seen real use. She walked toward me with the kind of purposeful stride that said she'd done this 100 times before. "Mr. Caldwell?" she asked, extending a hand. I shook it. Her grip was firm, her palm dry despite the humidity. That's me. Thanks for coming out. She nodded, pulling a small notepad from her belt. Tell me what you saw. Start from the beginning. I walked her through it. The storm, the detour, the bridge, the car, the open door, the keys in the ignition, the phone and purse on the seat. I didn't mention the figure I'd seen in the mirror. Not yet. I wanted to see how she reacted to the rest of it first. She took notes, her pen moving quickly across the paper, her expression neutral. When I finished, she looked up at me. And you didn't see anyone? No one walking? No one in the water? Nothing? I hesitated, then decided to go for it. I saw something, I said slowly. In my rearview mirror, after I'd passed the car. Just for a second. Someone sitting in the driver's seat, but when I looked again, the seat was empty. Her pen stopped moving. She looked at me, her eyes sharp. You're sure about that? I nodded. I know how it sounds. But yeah, I'm sure. Or at least I think I'm sure. It was raining hard, visibility was bad. Could have been a shadow, could have been my brain playing tricks. But I saw it. Deputy Rigsby closed her notepad and slipped it back into her belt. All right, she said. I'm going to need you to come with me back to the bridge. I want you to show me exactly where the car was, and I want to take a look around before we call in a tow. You okay with that? I glanced back at my truck, still parked under the lights. What about my rig? She followed my gaze. Leave it here. We'll come back for it. This won't take long. I climbed into the passenger seat of her patrol car, and we headed back toward the bridge. The road was darker now, the storm clouds blocking out what little moonlight there might have been. Deputy Rigsby drove in silence, her eyes on the road, her hands steady on the wheel. After a few minutes, she spoke. You're not the first person to report something strange out here, she said, her tone carefully neutral. That bridge has a reputation. Most of it's just local folklore, people getting spooked by the weather and the isolation. But every now and then, someone sees something that doesn't fit the pattern, something that makes you wonder. I looked at her. You think I'm making this up? She glanced at me, one eyebrow raised. I didn't say that. I'm just saying I've heard stories, and I've learned not to dismiss them outright. We turned onto the narrow road that led to the bridge, and I felt my stomach tighten. The trees closed in around us, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. The patrol car's headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the cracked asphalt and the overgrown shoulders. Then the bridge came into view. The green Buick was still there, parked sideways across the lanes exactly as I'd left it. The driver's door was still open, the interior light still on, though it looked dimmer now, like the battery was starting to die. Deputy Rigsby pulled up behind it and put the car in park. She grabbed a flashlight from the center console and stepped out. I followed, my boots splashing in shallow puddles that had formed on the wooden planks. We approached the car together. Rigsby shined her light inside, sweeping it across the seats, the floor, the dashboard. Everything was exactly as I'd described. Keys in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat, glasses folded neatly on top of the map. She leaned in, checking the glove compartment, the center console, the back seat. Then she stepped back and circled the car, her light tracing the outline of the vehicle. When she reached the rear bumper, she stopped. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice tight. "Come look at this." I walked over, my pulse quickening. She was shining her light at the ground behind the car, at a spot where the wooden planks met the steel framework of the bridge. There, pressed into a thin layer of mud that had accumulated in the gap, was a handprint, small, delicate, clearly feminine, and next to it another one, and another. They led from the car toward the edge of the bridge toward the railing, and then they stopped. Deputy Rigsby crouched down, studying the prints. She pulled out her phone and took several photos, the flash illuminating the scene in stark white bursts. Then she stood and walked to the railing, shining her light down into the water below. I joined her, gripping the cold metal, staring into the blackness. The river was moving fast, churning and hissing against the support beams. If someone had gone over, they were long gone by now. "We need to call this in," Rigsby said, pulling her radio from her belt. She keyed the mic and spoke quickly, requesting backup, a dive team, and a tow truck. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the tension underneath. When she finished, she clipped the radio back onto her belt and looked at me. "I'm going to need you to stay here while I check the underside of the bridge. There's a maintenance access point about 50 feet back. Sometimes people go down there, especially if they're trying to hide or get out of the weather." I nodded, though the idea of staying on that bridge alone made my skin crawl. She walked back toward the patrol car, grabbed a longer flashlight and a coil of rope from the trunk, and headed toward the far end of the bridge. I watched her disappear into the shadows, her light bobbing as she descended. Then I turned back to the Buick, staring at the open door, the empty seat. The interior light flickered once, twice. Then it went out completely, plunging the car into darkness. I stepped closer, my own flashlight raised, and peered inside. The keys were gone. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I'd seen them there not 5 minutes ago, hanging from the ignition. But now the column was empty. I backed away slowly, my eyes scanning the interior, looking for any sign of movement. Nothing. Just the empty seat, the forgotten purse, the glasses that no one would ever wear again. I heard a shout from below, Deputy Rigsby's voice, sharp and urgent. I ran to the railing and looked down. Her flashlight was moving erratically, sweeping back and forth across the support beams. Then it stopped, focused on something I couldn't see from my angle. "Caldwell!" she yelled. "Get down here, now!" I found the access point, a rusted ladder bolted to the side of the bridge, and climbed down as fast as I dared. The rungs were slick with moisture, and I could feel the bridge swaying slightly in the wind. When I reached the bottom, I found myself standing on a narrow maintenance platform, maybe 3 feet wide, suspended above the churning water. Deputy Rigsby was 20 feet ahead, crouched near one of the support beams, her light fixed on something wedged between the steel and the concrete. I made my way toward her, gripping the railing with one hand, my flashlight with the other. When I got close enough to see what she was looking at, I felt my stomach drop. It was a shoe, a woman's shoe, brown leather, scuffed and waterlogged, with the laces still tied. And inside it, barely visible in the beam of Rigsby's light, was something pale, something that looked like bone. She didn't look at me, her eyes locked on the discovery. "We're going to need that dive team sooner than I thought," she said quietly. Then she stood and keyed her radio again, her voice steady despite what we'd just found. As she spoke, I looked past her, deeper into the shadows beneath the bridge. And that's when I saw them. Scratches. Deep, frantic scratches carved into the concrete support beam, clustered together in groups of 3 and 4. They covered an area about 2 feet wide, too high to have been made by an animal, too deliberate to be accidental. Someone had made those marks. Someone desperate. Someone terrified. I reached out and touched one of the grooves, my fingers tracing the rough edge. It was deep, maybe a 1/4 inch, carved with something hard and sharp. Fingernails, I realized. These were fingernail marks. Deputy Rigsby finished her radio call and stepped beside me, her light joining mine. We stood there in silence, staring at the scratches, both of us understanding what they meant. Someone had been here. Someone had been trapped here. And judging by the handprints on the bridge above and the shoe wedged in the beam, that someone had fought like hell to get free. "This wasn't an accident," Rigsby said, her voice barely audible over the sound of the water. "Someone was here, recently." She turned to me, her expression grim. "And I don't think they left on their own." We stayed under that bridge for another 20 minutes waiting for backup to arrive. Deputy Rigsby documented everything with her phone camera while I stood back, trying to process what we'd found. The scratches in the concrete kept drawing my eye. They were so deliberate, so frantic. I'd hauled freight through some rough areas over the years, seen accident scenes, heard stories from other drivers about things they'd witnessed on the road. But this was different. This felt personal, like whoever made those marks had been trying to leave a message, trying to tell someone what happened to them before it was too late. The sound of vehicles pulling up above finally broke the silence. Rigsby climbed back up the ladder first and I followed, my legs shaky from the adrenaline wearing off. When we reached the top, there were 3 more patrol cars parked behind Rigsby's vehicle, their light bars casting red and blue streaks across the wet planks. A handful of deputies were already setting up a perimeter with yellow tape, and someone was taking photos of the Buick from multiple angles. Rigsby walked over to an older man in a sheriff's jacket, speaking to him in a low voice while gesturing toward the edge of the bridge. I stood by the railing, keeping out of the way, watching the organized chaos unfold. One of the deputies approached me, a younger guy with a crew cut and a notepad. He asked me the same questions Rigsby had, and I gave him the same answers, my voice feeling detached from my body. After he finished, he told me I was free to go but that they might need to follow up in the next few days. I nodded, barely hearing him. My mind was still under that bridge, staring at those scratches. Deputy Rigsby found me as I was heading back toward her patrol car. "I'll drive you back to your truck," she said. Her voice was tired now, the professional edge worn down by whatever she'd been discussing with the other officers. We drove in silence for the first few minutes. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the road slick and reflective under the sparse streetlights. Finally, she spoke. "You did the right thing, calling this in. Whatever happened out there, we'll figure it out. But it's going to take time." I looked over at her. "You think someone's still alive? The person who left those scratches?" She kept her eyes on the road, her jaw tight. "I don't know. The shoe we found, it's been in the water for a while. Could be days, could be weeks. We won't know more until the dive team goes down and the coroner takes a look. But those scratches, those handprints, they tell a story. Someone was desperate, someone was fighting." She paused, then added, "And someone might have been watching." That last part hung in the air between us. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. We pulled into the gas station lot where my truck was still parked, engine off, lights dark. It looked smaller somehow, less solid than it had before. Rigsby put the car in park and turned to me. "You staying in the area tonight?" I shook my head. "No, I need to get this load to the depot by morning. I'll find a motel up the road, grab a few hours of sleep and finish the run." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to me. "If you think of anything else, anything at all, call me. Doesn't matter what time." I took the card and slipped it into my wallet. "I will. And hey, deputy, be careful out there. That bridge, it doesn't feel right." She gave me a thin smile. "I've been working this parish for 8 years. I know which places feel wrong. Blackwater's been on that list since day 1. I climbed out of the patrol car and walked over to my truck, unlocking the cab and hauling myself up into the driver's seat. The interior smelled like stale coffee and diesel, familiar and grounding. I started the engine and it rumbled to life, the gauges flickering before settling into their normal positions. Rigsby was still parked behind me, watching. I gave her a small wave, then pulled out of the lot and headed north on Highway 1. The road was empty, just me and the occasional set of taillights in the distance. I tried to focus on the drive, on the rhythm of the engine and the hum of the tires on wet asphalt, but my mind kept drifting back to the bridge, the abandoned car, the figure in the mirror, the scratches. I turned on the radio, flipping through stations until I found something with a steady beat, hoping it would drown out the thoughts circling in my head. It didn't work. About 30 miles up the road, I saw a sign for a truck stop. Gravel parking lot, a squat building with a neon sign that said fuel and food, and a cluster of rigs parked in uneven rows. I pulled in and found a spot near the back, away from the overhead lights. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the dashboard. My hands were still shaking. I climbed out and walked toward the building, hoping a cup of coffee and some solid ground under my feet would help settle my nerves. The inside of the truck stop was bright and fluorescent with rows of snacks and a small diner counter along the far wall. A handful of drivers were scattered around, most of them staring at their phones or nursing cups of coffee. I walked up to the counter and ordered a large black coffee and a sandwich I wasn't sure I'd be able to eat. The woman behind the register rang me up without making eye contact, and I took my food to a corner booth near the window. I was halfway through the coffee when someone slid into the seat across from me. I looked up, startled, and found myself facing a man I didn't recognize. He was maybe 50, with a weathered face, graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, and coveralls stained with grease and dirt. He had the look of someone who worked with his hands for a living, someone who'd spent most of his life outdoors. "You're the driver who found the car," he said. It wasn't a question. I set down my cup slowly, my pulse quickening. "How do you know that?" He leaned back, crossing his arms. "Small parish. Word travels fast, especially when it involves Blackwater Bridge. I heard it on the scanner about an hour ago. Abandoned vehicle. Possible evidence of foul play. Trucker from out of town called it in." He studied me for a moment, his eyes sharp. "Name's Hoyt Brammer. I run a garage a few miles south of here. I've pulled more cars out of that bayou than I care to count." I relaxed slightly, though I kept my guard up. "Luther Caldwell," I said, extending a hand. He shook it, his grip firm and calloused. "What do you want, Mr. Brammer?" He glanced around the diner, making sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "I want to know what you saw out there. The real story, not the sanitized version you gave the deputies." I frowned. "I told them everything." He shook his head. "You told them what you thought they'd believe. But I know that bridge. I know what happens out there. And I know you saw something that didn't make sense. Something that scared you enough to get off that bridge as fast as you could." I stared at him, trying to decide how much to say. Finally, I sighed. "I saw someone in the car, in the rearview mirror, just for a second, but when I looked again, they were gone." Hoyt nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he already suspected. "You're not the first. Over the years, drivers have reported seeing figures on that bridge, people who shouldn't be there. Most of them don't stick around long enough to file a report. They just drive through and try to forget. But a few, like you, they stop. They look closer, and that's when things get complicated." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "What are you saying? That the bridge is haunted?" He let out a dry laugh. "Haunted? Maybe. But I think it's more than that. I think someone's using that bridge. Using the isolation, the weather, the reputation. People disappear out there, and everyone assumes it's the bridge, the bayou, the storm. But what if it's not? What if someone's been using that story as cover?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought about the handprints, the scratches, the shoe wedged in the support beam. You think someone's been killing people out there? Hoyt's expression darkened. I think it's possible, and I think the authorities have been too quick to write it off as accidents or runaways. That bridge has a body count, Luther. It's been adding up for years, but no one wants to admit that there might be a pattern. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? He looked at me steadily. Because you found something tonight. Something that might finally prove what I've been saying. And because I think you're the kind of person who won't just walk away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, sliding it across the table. This is a list of people who've gone missing near that bridge over the last 20 years. 11 names. Some of them were written off as drownings, some as runaways. One was never officially reported because the family didn't trust the police. I unfolded the paper and scanned the names. They were written in neat handwriting, each one followed by a date and a brief description. Sarah Treadwell, August 1987, age 34. 2 daughters, ages 9 and 12. Vehicle found on bridge, occupants missing. That was the family from the newspaper clipping the gas station clerk had shown me. The list continued, each entry more unsettling than the last. The most recent one was dated April 2023, just 5 months ago. Iris Fontenot, April 2023, age 28. Vehicle found on bridge, driver missing. Presumed drowned. I looked up at Hoyt. You think all of these are connected? He nodded. I do, and I think whoever's responsible has been operating for decades. They know the area, they know when to strike, and they know how to make it look like an accident. I folded the paper and slipped it into my jacket pocket. What do you want me to do with this? Hoyt leaned back, his expression grim. Show it to Deputy Rigsby. She's one of the good ones. She'll listen, and if she doesn't, then at least you tried. He stood up, preparing to leave, then paused. One more thing. If you go back out there, and I'm guessing you will, don't go alone, and don't go at night. That bridge has rules, Luther, and if you break them, you might not make it off. He walked away before I could respond, disappearing through the door and into the parking lot. I sat there for a long time, staring at the list in my pocket, trying to decide what to do next. The smart move would have been to hand it over to Rigsby and let her handle it. But something about Hoyt's words stuck with me. You're the kind of person who won't just walk away. Was I? I'd spent 17 years hauling freight, keeping my head down, staying out of trouble. But tonight had changed something. I'd seen something I couldn't unsee, found something I couldn't ignore. I finished my coffee, left a tip on the table, and walked back out to my truck. The parking lot was quieter now, most of the other drivers already asleep in their cabs. I climbed into mine, locked the doors, and pulled out the business card Rigsby had given me. I stared at it for a moment, then dialed the number. It rang 3 times before she picked up. Rigsby. Her voice was clipped, distracted. Deputy, it's Luther Caldwell. I just talked to someone. A mechanic named Hoyt Brammer. He gave me a list of people who've gone missing near Blackwater Bridge over the last 20 years. I think you need to see it. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, where are you? I told her the name of the truck stop. Stay there, she said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up before I could say anything else. I leaned back in the seat, staring out at the dark parking lot, and wondered what the hell I'd just gotten myself into. Rigsby arrived 18 minutes later, pulling up in her patrol car with the lights off. She climbed out and walked over to my truck, and I handed her the list through the open window. She read it by the light of her flashlight, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she looked up at me. Where did Hoyt get this? I shrugged. He didn't say. But he thinks someone's been using the bridge to cover up murders. He thinks there's a pattern. She folded the list and slipped it into her pocket. Hoyt Brammer's been pushing this theory for years. Most people think he's paranoid, but after tonight, I'm starting to wonder if he's onto something. She glanced back toward the road, then at me. Did he say anything else? I thought about his warning. He said not to go back out there alone, and not at night. Rigsby nodded slowly. Good advice. That bridge is going to be an active crime scene for at least the next few days. We'll have officers stationed there around the clock. If someone's been using it, they're not going to be able to now. She paused, then added, but if Hoyt's right, and there is someone out there, they're going to be looking for another place, another opportunity. I felt a chill run down my spine. You think they'll try again? She met my eyes, her expression hard. I think people who do this kind of thing don't just stop. They adapt. And if Blackwater's no longer an option, they'll find somewhere else. She has stepped back from the truck. Get some rest, Luther. And if you think of anything else, call me, anytime. I watched her drive away, then sat in the cab for another hour, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My mind kept circling back to the bridge, to the scratches, to the list of names in Rigsby's pocket. 11 people over 20 years. Maybe more that Hoyt hadn't found. And somewhere out there, someone who'd been getting away with it for decades. I finally managed to doze off around 3 a.m., but the sleep was thin and restless, broken by dreams of dark water and scratching sounds that seemed to come from inside the walls of the cab. When I woke up just after dawn, my neck was stiff and my head was pounding. I started the engine, pulled out of the truck stop, and headed north toward the depot. I had a delivery to make, a schedule to keep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that whatever had happened on Blackwater Bridge was still unfolding, and I was caught in the middle of it. 2 days later, I was back home in Shreveport when my phone rang. It was Deputy Rigsby. "Luther, we found something," she said, her voice tight. "The dive team recovered a body from the river. Female, late 20s, consistent with the description of Iris Fontenot, the woman who went missing in April." I sat down heavily on the couch. Jesus. Rigsby continued, "The coroner's preliminary report says she didn't drown. She was already dead when she went into the water. Blunt force trauma to the head. We're calling it a homicide." My stomach twisted. So Hoyt was right. There was a pause. It's looking that way. We're reopening several of the cases on his list, and we've got a few leads we're following up on. But Luther, I need you to be careful. If someone realizes you were the one who found the car, who started all of this, they might come looking for you. I thought about the figure I'd seen in the rearview mirror, the keys that had vanished from the ignition. You think they already know? Rigsby's silence was answer enough. Just keep your doors locked and your phone close. And if you see anything unusual, call me immediately. We're doing everything we can, but this person's been operating for a long time. They're smart, they're careful, and they're not going to go down easy. I hung up and sat in the growing darkness of my living room, staring at the wall. I'd spent 17 years driving through the night, hauling loads across empty highways, never worrying about much beyond weather and deadlines. But now, every shadow seemed heavier, every sound sharper. I kept thinking about those scratches under the bridge, about the desperate, frantic energy they carried. Someone had fought hard to survive, and they'd lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept getting up, checking the locks, looking out the windows. Every car that passed seemed to slow down just a little too much. Every sound in the street made my heart race. Around 2 a.m., I gave up trying to rest and made a pot of coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started searching for information about Blackwater Bridge, about the missing persons cases, about anything that might help me understand what I'd stumbled into. What I found didn't make me feel any better. The bridge had been the site of multiple disappearances going back to the 1970s, maybe earlier. Some of the older cases were barely documented, just names and dates in archived newspaper articles. But the pattern was there. Always at night. Always during bad weather. Always someone traveling alone, and always the vehicle was found abandoned, keys in the ignition, no sign of the driver. I thought about calling Rigsby, but it was the middle of the night and I didn't have anything new to tell her. Instead, I printed out everything I'd found and added it to the list Hoyt had given me. Then I sat back and stared at the pile of paper on my table, feeling the weight of it. 11 names, maybe more. And somewhere out there, the person responsible was still free, still hunting. 3 weeks passed before I went back to Blackwater Bridge. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, of checking my rearview mirror every few minutes, of jumping at shadows that turned out to be nothing. Deputy Rigsby had called twice during that time, once to update me on the investigation, and once to ask if I'd noticed anything unusual. The first call brought news that the coroner had confirmed Iris Fontenot's death as homicide, and that they were exhuming 2 other bodies from cases on Hoyt's list. The second call was shorter, more cautious. She wanted to know if I'd seen any unfamiliar vehicles near my house, if anyone had approached me, if I'd received any strange phone calls. I told her no, but that wasn't entirely true. Someone had been watching my house. I'd seen the same dark pickup truck parked down the street on 3 separate occasions, always late at night, always with the engine running but no headlights. The first time I noticed it, I convinced myself it was just a neighbor, someone having a cigarette before heading inside. The second time, I wrote down the license plate and called it in to Rigsby. She ran it through the system and told me it came back to a salvage yard in Lafayette, reported stolen 2 months ago. The third time I saw it, I grabbed my tire iron and walked toward it. The truck peeled out before I got within 50 feet, tires screeching as it disappeared around the corner. After that, I started keeping a crowbar under my pillow and my phone on the nightstand, ringer turned all the way up. I stopped taking night runs, started parking in well-lit areas, and avoided any route that took me near Terrebonne Parish. But the fear didn't go away. It settled into my chest like a weight, pressing down every time I climbed into the cab, every time I checked my mirrors, every time the sun started to set. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating right, and I sure as hell wasn't thinking straight. That's probably why I decided to go back. I told myself it was because I wanted to see if the police had found anything new, if there were any updates I hadn't heard about. But the truth was simpler and stupider. I needed to face it. I needed to stand on that bridge again and prove to myself that it was just a place, just wood and steel and concrete. Nothing more. I waited until mid-morning on a Thursday, when the sun was high and the weather was clear. I didn't tell Rigsby I was going. I didn't tell anyone. The drive down felt longer than it should have. Every mile marker seemed to stretch. Every curve in the road felt sharper. I kept the radio off, preferring the silence to the chatter of DJs and commercials. My hands were tight on the wheel, my jaw clenched. I passed the gas station where I'd met the clerk with the newspaper clipping, and I slowed down, considering stopping. But I didn't. I kept driving, following the narrow road that led to the bridge. When I reached the turnoff, I saw that the access road had been blocked with orange cones and a wooden sawhorse. A laminated sign zip-tied to the sawhorse read, "Road closed. Active investigation. No unauthorized access." I pulled over onto the shoulder and shut off the engine. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the sign. Then I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket, climbed out, and walked around the barricade. The road looked different in daylight. Less threatening, but somehow more desolate. The trees were still dense, their branches forming a canopy overhead, but without the rain and the darkness, I could see the details I'd missed before. The deep ruts in the asphalt, the way the road tilted slightly to the right, like it had been settling unevenly for years. The tire tracks that crisscrossed the dirt shoulders, some fresh, some old and overgrown with weeds. I walked slowly, listening to the sound of my boots on the cracked pavement, the distant call of birds somewhere in the swamp. The bridge came into view after about 10 minutes of walking. In daylight, it looked even worse than I remembered. The wooden planks were warped and rotted in places, gaps between them wide enough to see the water below. The steel girders were covered in rust, streaked with orange and brown like old blood. The railing was bent in several spots, and one section near the far end had collapsed entirely, leaving a jagged opening where someone could easily fall through. I stopped at the entrance, staring at the place where the green Buick had been parked. The car was gone now, towed away by the police, but I could still see the faint outline where its tires had rested, pressed into the thin layer of silt that had accumulated on the planks. I stepped onto the bridge, feeling it shift slightly under my weight. The wood creaked, a sound that made my stomach tighten. I walked slowly toward the center, where I'd seen the handprints leading toward the railing. They were gone now, washed away by rain or obscured by foot traffic from the investigators. But I knew where they'd been. I stopped at the spot and looked down into the water. It was clearer in the daylight, moving fast, but not churning the way it had during the storm. I could see the support beams below, covered in algae and debris, and the narrow maintenance platform where Rigsby and I had found the shoe. I thought about climbing down, retracing the steps we'd taken that night, but something stopped me. A feeling. The same feeling I'd had when I first crossed this bridge, the sense that I was being watched. I turned slowly, scanning the trees on both sides of the road, the shadows between the trunks, the dense undergrowth that lined the banks. Nothing moved. No birds, no wind, no sound except the water below. It was too quiet, unnaturally quiet. I started walking again, heading toward the far end of the bridge. My boots echoed on the planks, each step sounding louder than it should have. I was halfway across when I saw it. A piece of fabric, snagged on one of the rusted bolts that held the railing together. It was small, maybe 2 inches square, pale blue and torn along one edge. I crouched down and examined it without touching it. It looked like it had come from a shirt or a blouse, the kind of lightweight material someone might wear in summer. I pulled out my phone and took a picture, then stood and kept walking. At the far end of the bridge, where the road continued into the trees, I found something else. Tire tracks, fresh ones, cutting through the mud and gravel. They were wide, consistent with a truck or a large SUV, and they led off the main road onto a narrow path that I hadn't noticed before. The path was overgrown, barely visible, but the tracks were clear. Someone had driven through here recently, within the last few days. I followed the tracks for about 50 feet, pushing through low-hanging branches and thorny bushes, until the path opened up into a small clearing. The clearing was maybe 20 feet across, surrounded by dense trees and thick underbrush. In the center, there was a fire pit, blackened stones arranged in a circle with ash and charred wood in the middle. Around the pit, I saw beer cans, cigarette butts, and a few pieces of trash, fast food wrappers and empty plastic bottles. It looked like a place where people came to drink, to party, to get away from the main road. But something about it felt wrong. The fire pit was too clean, too deliberately arranged, and the trash, it was all concentrated in one area, like someone had swept it into a pile. I walked closer, my flashlight raised even though it was daylight. That's when I saw the cooler. It was tucked under a low bush near the edge of the clearing. A white styrofoam cooler with a cracked lid. I crouched down and opened it. Inside, there were 3 bottles of water, a roll of duct tape, a coil of nylon rope, and a pair of work gloves. My blood ran cold. I pulled out my phone and dialed Rigsby's number. She answered on the second ring. "Luther, what's wrong?" Her voice was sharp, alert. I kept my voice low, even though I was pretty sure I was alone. I'm at Blackwater Bridge. On the far side, past the main span. I found a clearing with a fire pit, and there's a cooler here with rope, duct tape, and gloves. Deputy, I think this is a staging area. I think someone's been using this place. There was a pause, then I heard her moving, the sound of keys jingling. "Stay where you are. Do not touch anything else." "I'm on my way, 10 minutes. She hung up. I backed away from the cooler, my heart pounding. I turned to head back toward the bridge, but I stopped. There was another path, branching off from the clearing leading deeper into the woods. I hesitated, knowing I should wait for Rigsby, but something pulled me forward. I followed the path, moving carefully, watching where I stepped. The path twisted through the trees for maybe 100 feet before it opened up again. This time, I found myself standing at the edge of a steep embankment that dropped down to the water. The bayou was wider here, slower, and the banks were lined with cypress trees, their roots twisting into the mud like gnarled fingers. And there, halfway down the embankment, I saw something that made my stomach lurch. A tarp, old and stained, partially covered with leaves and branches. It was weighted down at the corners with rocks, and one edge had come loose, revealing what looked like fabric underneath. I climbed down the embankment, sliding on the wet mud, grabbing at roots and branches to keep from falling. When I reached the tarp, I pulled back the loose corner. Underneath, I found clothes, women's clothes, a shirt, a pair of jeans, a jacket. They were folded, not crumpled, arranged neatly like someone had placed them there deliberately. I lifted the shirt and saw a name tag pinned to the collar. Iris Bayou Diner. My hands started shaking. This was Iris Fontenot's uniform, the woman whose body had been pulled from the river, the woman who died from blunt force trauma before she ever hit the water. I dropped the shirt and backed away, my boots slipping on the mud. I needed to get out of here. I needed to get back to the bridge, back to my truck, back to somewhere with people and lights and safety. I turned and started climbing back up the embankment, pulling myself up hand over hand. I was almost at the top when I heard it. The sound of an engine. Close. Too close. I hauled myself over the edge and looked back toward the clearing. A dark pickup truck had pulled in, the same one I'd seen outside my house. The engine was idling, but no one got out. I could see the silhouette of the driver through the windshield, but the glare of the sun made it impossible to make out any features. I froze, my mind racing. I was trapped. The only way back to the bridge was through the clearing, and the truck was blocking the path. I could try to go around through the woods, but the undergrowth was too dense, and I'd make too much noise. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with a solid build and a face I couldn't quite see under the brim of a baseball cap. He was wearing jeans, work boots, and a dark jacket. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring in my direction. Then he reached back into the truck and pulled something out. A tire iron, long, heavy, with a curved end that gleamed dully in the sunlight. I ran. I didn't think, didn't plan, just turned and bolted into the trees. Branches whipped at my face, roots grabbed at my boots. I could hear him behind me, crashing through the underbrush, his breathing heavy and steady. I ran toward the sound of the water, hoping I could lose him in the dense vegetation near the bayou. But the ground was uneven, full of hidden ditches and fallen logs, and I was slowing down, my lungs burning, my legs shaking. I broke through the tree line and found myself back at the bridge, but on the wrong side, the side I'd started from. I could see my truck parked on the shoulder, maybe 200 feet away. I sprinted toward it, fumbling in my pocket for the keys. I heard the man behind me, closer now, his boots pounding on the asphalt. I reached the truck and yanked the door open, throwing myself inside and slamming the locks. I jammed the key into the ignition and turned it. The engine roared to life. The man reached the truck just as I threw it into drive. He swung the tire iron at the driver's side window, and the glass exploded, showering me with fragments. I floored the gas and the truck lurched forward, tires spinning on the gravel. The man stumbled back, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. It was weathered, lined with age, but I didn't recognize him. He wasn't anyone I'd seen before, just a stranger with cold eyes and a weapon in his hand. I drove as fast as I dared, not caring about the cones or the sawhorse, just needing to get away. In my rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the middle of the road, watching me go. He didn't chase me. He didn't need to. He knew where I lived. He'd already been to my house. He could find me whenever he wanted. I made it back to Highway 1 and pulled into the first gas station I saw. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I called Rigsby, and this time I didn't wait for her to speak. He was there, the guy from the truck. He came after me. He had a tire iron and he knows who I am. Deputy, he's been to my house. He knows where I live. Rigsby's voice was calm, but I could hear the tension underneath. Where are you now? I told her. Stay there. Stay in a public place. I'm sending 2 units to your location and I'm on my way to the bridge. Luther, I need you to stay on the line with me until my officers arrive. Can you do that? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yeah, I can do that. I sat in the cab with the engine running, the broken window letting in the humid air, and I stayed on the phone with Rigsby until 2 patrol cars pulled into the lot 15 minutes later. The officers took my statement, photographed the broken window, and told me they'd escort me home. But I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to be anywhere that man could find me. Rigsby called me back 2 hours later. Her voice was tight, exhausted. We found the clearing. We found the cooler, the tarp, the clothes, and we found something else, a second vehicle, abandoned about a mile from the bridge. It matches the description of a car reported missing 3 days ago. The driver was a woman from Houma, traveling alone. We've issued an APB for the truck you described, and we're setting up roadblocks on all the major routes out of the parish. I closed my eyes, feeling sick. Do you think she's still alive? Rigsby was quiet for a moment. I don't know, but we're doing everything we can. She paused, then added, Luther, I need you to understand something. You did the right thing. You found evidence that's going to help us stop this person, but you also put yourself in danger, and I can't guarantee your safety if you go back out there. I laughed, a bitter sound. I'm not going back. I'm done with that bridge. I'm done with this whole damn parish. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. I'd be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life. Every dark truck, every stranger's face, every shadow in my rearview mirror. I'd never be free of it. The investigation continued for months. Rigsby kept me updated when she could, but the details were sparse. They never found the man who chased me. The truck was located burned out in a field near the Texas border, stripped of anything that could identify the owner. The woman from Houma was found 2 weeks later, alive, wandering along a back road with no memory of what had happened to her. The doctors said it was trauma-induced amnesia, that her mind had blocked out whatever she'd experienced. Maybe that was a mercy. They exhumed 4 more bodies, all matching cases from Hoyt's list, all ruled homicides. The FBI got involved, opened a task force, started connecting dots across state lines. But the man responsible stayed gone, vanished like smoke. Rigsby told me they had theories, suspects, persons of interest, but no arrests, no closure, just a growing list of victims and a bridge that still stood, waiting. I quit long-haul trucking 6 months after that day. Took a job at a distribution center in Shreveport, day shifts only, no overnight runs. I sold my rig, bought a sedan, and started sleeping with the lights on. Some nights I still dream about that bridge. The scratches in the concrete, the handprints on the planks, the face I saw in the mirror, there and then gone. And sometimes in those dreams I'm back under the bridge, staring at those desperate claw marks, and I realize they're not old. They're fresh, and they're mine. I haven't been back to Terrebonne Parish since. I take the long way around, even if it adds hours to the drive. Because some shortcuts aren't worth it. Some roads lead places you can't come back from, and some bridges, once you cross them, you carry with you forever. Blackwater Bridge is still there, still standing. They never tore it down. And every now and then, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if someone else has found it. If someone else has stopped their car in the rain, stepped out into the storm and looked down into those dark waters. And if they did, I wonder if they made it off alive, because I'm not sure I did. I've been hauling freight through Appalachia for 12 years, and in that time I've learned that the mountains don't forgive mistakes. You miss a turn, you're adding 2 hours to your route. You push your rig too hard on a grade, you're looking at brake failure and a runaway truck ramp if you're lucky. And if you're not lucky, you're looking at a memorial cross on the side of the road with plastic flowers that someone changes out twice a year. The terrain up here demands respect, and the weather demands even more. I've driven through ice storms that turned I-64 into a skating rink. Fog so thick I couldn't see my own hood, and wind that pushed my trailer sideways across both lanes. But I'd never had real trouble until the day I crossed Devil's Span. It was early October 2023, and I was 3 days into a run from Pittsburgh to Knoxville, carrying industrial parts for a manufacturing plant. The load wasn't especially heavy, maybe 18,000 pounds, but it was awkward. Long steel beams that made the trailer sit high and catch every crosswind. I'd planned to take I-77 south through Charleston, but a traffic alert came through on my CB around noon, warning about a jackknifed semi near Beckley that had the interstate shut down in both directions. The dispatcher suggested I take an alternate route, a series of state highways that would loop me around the closure and add maybe 40 minutes to the trip. I pulled over at a rest stop to check the map. The alternate route looked straightforward enough on paper. A 2-lane highway that wound through the mountains, crossing a few rivers and passing through a handful of small towns. Nothing I hadn't done before. I grabbed a coffee from the vending machine, stretched my legs, and got back on the road. The first hour was uneventful. The highway was narrow but well-maintained, with freshly painted lines and clear signage. I passed through a town called Marlinton, stopped for fuel, and headed west into the hills. The trouble started around 3 p.m. I was climbing a long grade, the engine working hard, when I felt the steering wheel start to vibrate. At first, it was subtle, just a slight tremor that I figured was the road surface, or maybe a gust of wind. But it got worse. Within a mile, the vibration had turned into a steady shake that made my teeth rattle. I downshifted and slowed to about 35, gripping the wheel tight, trying to keep the rig steady. Something was wrong, mechanically wrong, and I needed to find a place to pull over before it got worse. The problem was, there was nowhere to stop. The road had narrowed to barely 2 lanes, with a steep embankment on the right and a sheer drop on the left. No shoulder, no turnouts, just crumbling asphalt and a rusted guardrail that looked like it had been installed sometime during the Eisenhower administration. I kept going, hoping I'd find a wide spot or a side road where I could pull off and figure out what was happening. The vibration got worse. The steering wheel was shaking so hard I could barely hold it, and I could feel the whole front end of the truck shimmying like it was trying to tear itself apart. Then I saw the bridge. It appeared around a curve, a narrow span of steel and rivets that looked like it belonged in a museum, not on an active highway. The structure was old, really old, with rusted girders and a deck made of metal grating instead of asphalt. A faded sign at the entrance read, "Devil's Span, weight limit 40 tons. I did the math in my head. My rig was just under that limit, but not by much. I eased off the throttle and approached slowly, the vibration in the steering wheel now accompanied by a grinding noise from somewhere under the cab. I made it about halfway across before the truck gave up. The grinding noise became a sharp metallic crack, and suddenly the steering wheel spun freely in my hands, completely disconnected from the wheels. The truck coasted to a stop, sitting at a slight angle across both lanes. I tried the ignition. The engine turned over but wouldn't catch. I tried again. Nothing. I sat there for a moment, hands still on the useless steering wheel, staring out at the bridge ahead of me. The metal grating beneath the tires hummed softly, vibrating with the wind that swept up from the gorge below. I climbed out of the cab and walked around to the front of the truck. The right front tire was intact, but when I crouched down and looked underneath, I saw the problem. The tie rod had snapped clean through, leaving the wheel assembly hanging at an awkward angle. It wasn't something I could fix on the side of the road, not without a tow truck and a shop with the right parts. I pulled out my phone. No signal, not even one bar. I walked to the edge of the bridge and held the phone up, trying different angles. Nothing. I looked around, taking in my surroundings for the first time. The bridge spanned a deep gorge, maybe 200 feet down to a river that I could hear but not see, hidden beneath a canopy of trees. The sides of the gorge were steep and heavily wooded, with no visible roads or trails leading down. On the far side of the bridge, the highway continued into the trees, curving out of sight. Behind me, the road I'd come from disappeared around the bend. I was alone, stranded on a bridge in the middle of nowhere, with no way to call for help. I went back to the cab and grabbed my CB radio, hoping to reach another driver, or maybe a local who might be monitoring the channel. I keyed the mic. "This is Clayton Reddick. Broke down on a bridge somewhere west of Marlinton. If anyone can hear me, I need a tow. Over." Static. I tried again, adjusting the squelch, changing channels. More static. Either I was too deep in the gorge for the signal to reach anyone, or there was no one out here to reach. I sat in the cab for a while, trying to think. I had maybe 3 hours of daylight left, and I didn't like the idea of spending the night on this bridge. The wind was picking up, and I could see storm clouds building to the west, dark and heavy. I needed to find help, which meant I needed to start walking. I grabbed my jacket, a flashlight, and a bottle of water, then locked the cab and started across the bridge on foot. The metal grating beneath my boots made a hollow ringing sound with each step, echoing off the gorge walls below. I could feel the bridge swaying slightly, responding to the wind and my weight. It wasn't a comforting sensation. I kept my eyes forward, focused on the far side, trying not to think about the 200-foot drop beneath me. Halfway across, I stopped and looked down through the grating. I could see the treetops far below, swaying in the wind, and beyond them a glimpse of dark water moving fast between the rocks. I made it to the far side and kept walking. The road continued through dense forest, winding uphill in a series of tight curves. I walked for maybe 20 minutes, my legs burning from the incline, before I saw a break in the trees. A dirt road, barely more than 2 ruts cutting through the underbrush, branched off to the right. There was a mailbox at the intersection, rusted and dented, with no name or number. I hesitated, then decided to follow it. If there was a mailbox, there was probably a house, and if there was a house, there was probably someone who could help. The dirt road wound through the trees for another 10 minutes before opening up into a small clearing. There was a house, or what was left of one. It was a single-story structure with peeling paint, a sagging porch, and a roof that looked like it was held together by hope and duct tape. A pickup truck sat in the yard, an old Ford with more rust than paint, propped up on cinder blocks with no wheels. Behind the house, I could see an outbuilding, maybe a shed or a workshop, with a tin roof and no windows. I walked up to the porch and knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. "Hello? Anyone home? I need help. My truck broke down on the bridge." Silence. I tried the door handle. Locked. I walked around to the back of the house looking for another entrance or maybe a light on inside. The windows were covered with curtains, but through a gap in one of them, I could see a kitchen. Empty, but not abandoned. There were dishes in the sink, a coffee pot on the counter, a calendar on the wall marked with dates. I heard a sound behind me and turned. A man was standing at the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 feet away. He'd appeared without making a sound, which shouldn't have been possible given the leaves and branches scattered across the ground. He was older, maybe 60, with a grizzled beard, a worn flannel shirt, and jeans held up with suspenders. He was holding a shotgun, not pointed at me, but cradled in his arms in a way that made it clear he knew how to use it. "You're trespassing," he said. His voice was flat, neither friendly nor hostile, just stating a fact. I raised my hand slightly, palms out. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. My truck broke down on the bridge back there, Devil's Span. I need to call a tow truck, but I don't have any signal. Is there a phone I could use?" The man stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he lowered the shotgun slightly. "Devil's Span," he repeated, like he was tasting the words. "You crossed Devil's Span." I nodded. "Yeah, made it about halfway before the tie rod snapped. Truck's sitting right in the middle of it. I need to get it towed before dark." The man shook his head slowly. "No one's going to tow you off that bridge. Not today, not any day." I frowned. "What do you mean? There's got to be a tow service around here. This is a state highway." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "State highway. That's a good one. You know how long it's been since anyone from the state came out here to fix that bridge? 20 years, maybe more. They don't care about this road, and they sure as hell don't care about that bridge." I lowered my hands, confused. "Look, I just need to make a phone call. If you don't have a phone, just point me toward the nearest town. I'll walk if I have to." The man studied me again, then sighed. "Nearest town's Cutter's Gap, about 5 miles north, but you won't find help there either, not for that bridge." He turned and started walking back toward the trees. "You want my advice? Leave the truck. Walk back the way you came. Don't spend the night anywhere near Devil's Span." I called after him. "Why? What's wrong with the bridge?" He stopped and looked back at me over his shoulder. "What's wrong with it? Everything. That bridge has been taking people for 40 years. Sometimes they make it across, sometimes they don't. But it always takes something. You're lucky you only lost your steering." He disappeared into the trees before I could respond. I stood there in the clearing, trying to make sense of what he'd just said. Taking people. It always takes something. The words didn't sit right, didn't make logical sense, but they wormed their way into my head anyway. I walked back to the road and headed north, following his directions toward Cutter's Gap. The sun was getting lower now, the shadows stretching across the pavement, and the wind was picking up. I could smell rain in the air, that sharp electric scent that comes before a storm. Cutter's Gap turned out to be less a town and more a collection of buildings clustered around a crossroads. There was a gas station with 2 pumps and a hand-painted sign that said "Open," a general store with a closed sign in the window, and a diner with flickering neon letters that spelled out "Eats." I headed for the diner, hoping to find someone who could help. The door stuck when I tried to open it, swollen from humidity, and I had to put my shoulder into it. Inside, the place was nearly empty. A handful of booths lined the walls, their vinyl seats patched with duct tape. A long counter ran along the back, with a pass-through window to the kitchen. 2 people were inside. A waitress behind the counter, maybe 50 years old with tired eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail, and an older woman sitting in one of the booths, hunched over a cup of coffee. The waitress looked up when I came in. "Help you?" she asked. I walked up to the counter. "Yeah, I hope so. My truck broke down on a bridge a few miles south of here. Devil's Span, I think it's called. I need a tow truck and a mechanic. Can you point me in the right direction?" The waitress's expression changed. Not dramatically, just a tightening around her eyes, a slight stiffness in her posture. "Devil's Span," she said quietly. She glanced at the woman in the booth, who was now watching me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "You broke down on the bridge itself?" I nodded. "Right in the middle. Tie rod snapped. I need to get it off there before dark." The woman in the booth stood up slowly and walked over. She was older than I'd initially thought, maybe 70, with deep lines etched into her face and hands that trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the counter. "What's your name?" she asked. Her voice was soft but carried a weight that made me answer immediately. "Clayton Reddick. I'm a truck driver, hauling freight to Knoxville. This was supposed to be a detour around a highway closure." The woman nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something she already knew. "Clayton, you need to listen to me very carefully. That bridge, Devil's Span, it's not safe. Not because of the structure, though God knows that's bad enough. It's not safe because of what it does." I must have looked confused because the waitress cut in. "What Eunice is trying to say is that bridge has a history, a bad one. People who stop on it, who linger there, they don't always leave the same way they arrived." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" Eunice leaned closer. "I mean, that bridge takes things. Sometimes it's small. A watch stops working. A radio goes dead. But sometimes it's bigger, people disappear. Or they come back changed, wrong somehow. My husband crossed that bridge in 1979. He made it to the other side, but he wasn't the same man who started across. 3 months later, he walked into the woods and never came back." I took a step back, my mind reeling. "You're saying the bridge is haunted?" Eunice shook her head. "I'm saying the bridge is hungry, and if you left your truck sitting on it, you need to get it off there, tonight, before full dark." I stood in that diner, staring at Eunice and Hartwell, trying to process what she'd just told me. The bridge takes things. Her husband crossed it and came back wrong. The logical part of my brain wanted to dismiss it as small-town superstition, the kind of folklore that grows up around any old structure in an isolated place. But the look in her eyes wasn't the look of someone telling ghost stories to scare tourists. It was the look of someone who'd lived through something she couldn't explain and had spent decades trying to forget. The waitress, whose name tag I now noticed read Dale, poured me a cup of coffee without asking if I wanted one. "You should talk to Sheriff Tolliver," she said, setting the cup in front of me. "He's been working this area for 30 years. If anyone can help you get that truck off the bridge, it's him." She gestured to a wall-mounted phone near the restroom. "You can use that to call him, numbers on the board." I walked over to the phone, an old rotary model that looked like it belonged in a museum, and dialed the number written on a yellowed index card tacked to the wall. It rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Sheriff's office." The voice was male, older, with a thick mountain accent. "Yeah, hi. My name's Clayton Reddick. I'm a truck driver, and my rig broke down on Devil's Span. I'm at the diner in Cutter's Gap. The folks here said you might be able to help me get it towed." There was a long pause on the other end. Then, "You're on the bridge right now?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "No, I walked to town. The truck's still sitting on the bridge, right in the middle." Another pause. "Stay where you are. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up before I could say anything else. I went back to the counter and finished the coffee Dale had poured. Eunice was still watching me from her booth, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "When the sheriff gets here, ask him about 1983. Ask him what happened to the Mackey family." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but something in her tone told me she wouldn't elaborate. I nodded and waited. Sheriff Vern Tolliver arrived 12 minutes later. I heard the crunch of gravel outside. Then the door swung open and he stepped in. He was a big man, maybe 6'3", with a solid build that suggested he'd been strong in his youth and was still carrying most of it. His hair was gray, cut short, and his face was weathered in the way that comes from spending most of your life outdoors. He wore a standard sheriff's uniform, dark brown with a badge on the chest, and a gun belt that looked well used. His eyes found me immediately. "You Clayton Reddick?" he asked. I stood up. "Yes, sir." He walked over and extended a hand. His grip was firm, almost testing. "Vern Tolliver, you said your truck's on Devil's Span." I nodded. "Right in the middle. Tie rod snapped. I've been hauling freight for 12 years, and I've never seen one just break like that. No warning, no gradual wear, just snap." Tolliver's expression tightened. "How long's it been sitting there?" I checked my watch. "About 2 hours, maybe a little more." "I walked to that house down the dirt road, then came here. Is there a tow service that can get it off?" The sheriff looked past me, his gaze settling on Eunice. They exchanged a look that I couldn't quite read, some kind of silent communication that spoke of shared history. Then he looked back at me. "There's a wrecker in Richwood, about 40 miles east. But he won't come out here after dark, and we're losing light fast. If we're going to get your truck off that bridge, we need to do it now." He turned toward the door. "Come with me. We'll take my truck." I grabbed my jacket and followed him outside. His vehicle was a Ford F-250, white with a light bar on top and sheriff stenciled on the doors. I climbed into the passenger seat, and he pulled out of the lot, heading south. We drove in silence for the first few minutes. The road was narrow and winding, climbing back into the hills. The sun was low now, casting long shadows across the asphalt. Finally, I broke the silence. "Eunice told me to ask you about 1983, about the Mackey family." Tolliver's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the road. "Eunice has a long memory," he said quietly. I waited, giving him space to continue. After a moment, he did. "The Mackey family was from Kentucky. Husband, wife, 2 kids, maybe 8 and 10 years old. They were driving through on vacation, heading to Virginia Beach. This was August of '83, middle of summer. They came across Devil's Span around sunset. Witnesses said they saw the car cross the bridge, saw it reach the other side. But when deputies went looking for them the next day, the car was gone. Just vanished. I frowned. Vanished? How does a car just vanish? Tolliver shook his head. That's what we asked ourselves. We searched for 3 weeks. Divers went down into the gorge, checked every inch of the river. Search dogs covered the woods on both sides. We found nothing. No car, no bodies, no tire tracks leading off the road. It was like they drove across that bridge and straight into thin air. A chill ran down my spine. You think the bridge had something to do with it? He glanced at me, his expression grim. I think that bridge has had something to do with a lot of things over the years. The Mackeys weren't the first, and they weren't the last. There's been at least a dozen incidents on that span since it was built in 1952. Some are explainable. Rock slides, mechanical failures, driver error, but some aren't. We rounded a curve, and the bridge came into view. My truck was still there, sitting at an angle across both lanes exactly as I'd left it. The sight of it made my stomach tighten. Something about seeing it from a distance, isolated on that narrow span of steel and grating, made it look smaller, more vulnerable. Tolliver slowed as we approached, pulling to a stop about 50 feet from the bridge entrance. He killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at my truck. You said the tie rod just snapped? I nodded. Yeah. No warning. Just a snap, and then the steering went dead. He grunted. That's consistent with other incidents, mechanical failures that shouldn't happen. Brakes that were fine suddenly give out. Engines that seize for no reason. It's like the bridge finds the weak point and exploits it. I looked at him. You really believe the bridge is doing this? That it's some kind of malevolent force? Tolliver turned to face me. I've been sheriff here for 31 years. I've seen things on that bridge that I can't explain. Things that don't fit into any rational framework. So, yeah, I believe it. And more importantly, I respect it. That bridge has rules even if we don't understand them, and one of those rules is you don't linger. You cross it and you keep moving. He opened his door and stepped out. I followed, my legs feeling unsteady. We walked toward the bridge together, our boots making hollow sounds on the metal grating. The wind had picked up, whistling through the girders and carrying the scent of rain. I could feel the bridge swaying slightly under our weight, a sensation that made my stomach churn. We reached my truck, and Tolliver walked around it, inspecting the damage. He crouched down and looked at the broken tie rod, running his hand along the fractured metal. When he stood up, his expression was troubled. This didn't break from wear. This was sheared, clean cut, like something snapped it on purpose. I crouched down beside him and looked. He was right. The break was too clean, too precise. It didn't look like a stress fracture or metal fatigue. It looked like it had been cut. Could something have hit it? I asked. A rock, maybe? Tolliver shook his head. You would have heard it, felt it. This happened while you were driving, right? You felt the vibration, then the snap? I nodded. Yeah. No impact, no warning, just vibration and then failure. He stood up and looked around, his eyes scanning the bridge, the gorge, the tree line on both sides. We need to get this truck off here, now. He pulled out his radio and called for the wrecker. The conversation was brief, and I could hear the reluctance in the other man's voice even from where I was standing. Tolliver had to argue with him for a minute before he finally agreed to come out. When he clipped the radio back onto his belt, he looked at me. He'll be here in 40 minutes, but we're not waiting on the bridge. We'll wait on the far side, past the span. I glanced at my truck. What about my rig? I need to grab some things from the cab. Tolliver nodded. Make it quick. Get what you need and let's move. I climbed up into the cab and grabbed my overnight bag, my logbook, and the CB radio. As I was reaching for my jacket, I noticed something on the passenger seat. A photograph. Old, faded, creased down the middle like it had been folded and unfolded many times. I picked it up. It showed a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children, standing in front of a car. The car was a late 70s model sedan, pale blue, with wood paneling on the sides. The family was smiling, dressed in vacation clothes, the kind of casual outfits people wore in the 80s. On the back of the photo, written in faded ink, were the words, "Mackey Family, August 1983. My blood ran cold. I turned the photo over, staring at the faces. The father had his arm around the mother's shoulders. The kids were standing in front, the older one holding a stuffed animal. They looked happy, normal, just a family on vacation. I climbed out of the cab and walked over to Tolliver, holding out the photo. This was in my truck. On the passenger seat, I've never seen it before. Tolliver took the photo, and his face went pale. He stared at it for a long moment, his jaw working. "This is them," he said quietly. "This is the Mackey family." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How did it get in my truck? I locked the cab when I left. Tolliver looked up at me, and for the first time I saw something in his eyes that scared me more than anything Eunice had said. Fear. Real, unfiltered fear. "The bridge put it there," he said. "It's showing you what it took, what it's capable of." He handed the photo back to me. "We need to leave right now." We walked quickly toward the far end of the bridge, our footsteps echoing on the metal grating. Behind us, my truck sat silent and abandoned, dark against the fading light. I glanced back once and saw something that made me stop. The cab door was open, the driver's side door, the one I'd just closed and locked. It was hanging wide, swinging slightly in the wind. Tolliver grabbed my arm. "Don't look back. Just keep moving." We made it to the end of the bridge and kept walking another 100 feet before Tolliver finally stopped. He pulled out his radio again and spoke quickly, his voice tight. "This is Tolliver. I need every unit we have out here. Devil's Span. Now." I looked at him. "What's happening?" He didn't answer, just pointed back toward the bridge. I turned and looked. The cab door was closed now, and standing next to my truck, barely visible in the growing darkness, was a figure. Human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, with movements that didn't look natural. It stood there for a moment, perfectly still, then turned and looked directly at us. Tolliver grabbed me and pulled me behind his truck. "Don't let it see your eyes," he said urgently. "Don't look at it directly." I pressed myself against the side of the vehicle, my heart hammering. "What the hell is that?" Tolliver's voice was shaking. "I don't know, but it's been here as long as the bridge has, maybe longer. People have seen it over the years, always at dusk, always when someone's stranded on the span. It doesn't usually show itself this clearly." I risked a glance around the edge of the truck. The figure was still there, standing beside my rig. As I watched, it moved, not walking, but gliding across the bridge toward us. No footsteps, no sound, just smooth, impossible movement. Tolliver saw it too. He drew his service weapon, a revolver, and held it ready. "Get in the truck," he said. "Now." I didn't argue. I yanked open the passenger door and climbed in. Tolliver got in on the driver's side, started the engine, and threw it into reverse, backing away from the bridge at speed. The tires kicked up gravel as he turned around and floored it, heading back toward the cutter's gap. I looked in the side mirror. The figure was standing at the edge of the bridge, watching us go. Then it turned and walked back toward my truck, disappearing into the shadows. We drove for 5 minutes before either of us spoke. Tolliver's hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel, his breathing heavy. Finally, he said, "That wrecker's not coming out here. Not tonight. Maybe not ever." I stared at him. "What about my truck, my load? That's my livelihood sitting on that bridge." Tolliver pulled over to the side of the road and put the truck in park. He turned to face me, his expression hard. "Your truck is gone, Clayton. It belongs to the bridge now. Whatever that thing is, whatever lives out there, it claimed your rig the moment you stopped on that span. You can file an insurance claim, say it went over the side, say it was stolen, I don't care. But you're not getting it back." I felt anger rising in my chest. "You're the sheriff. You're telling me there's nothing you can do?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "What do you want me to do? Arrest it? Shoot it?" I tried that once, back in '91. Emptied my gun into it from 20 feet away. Every shot went right through like it wasn't even there. The thing just looked at me and kept coming. I barely made it off that bridge alive. I slumped back in the seat, feeling defeated. So, what do I do? Tolliver started driving again, heading back toward town. You walk away. You go home, you file your claim, and you find a different route. You never come back here. You never talk about what you saw, and you sure as hell never stop on that bridge again. We pulled into Cutter's Gap just as full darkness settled over the mountains. Tolliver parked in front of the diner and turned off the engine. "Dale will put you up for the night. There's a motel about 30 miles north where you can catch a bus tomorrow. I'll give you a ride in the morning." He handed me a business card. "If you need anything before then, call that number. But Clayton, do yourself a favor. Forget about Devil's Span. Forget you ever saw it." I took the card and climbed out of the truck. As I walked toward the diner, I looked back. Tolliver was still sitting in his truck, staring out at the dark road that led back to the bridge. He looked old, suddenly, worn down by years of dealing with something he couldn't fight, couldn't understand, couldn't stop. I went inside and found Dale waiting. She took one look at my face and nodded. "I'll get you a room ready." I didn't sleep that night. Dale set me up in a small room above the diner, a cramped space with a single bed, a dresser with a missing drawer, and a window that looked out over the empty main street of Cutter's Gap. The mattress was lumpy, the sheets smelled like mothballs, and every creak of the old building settling made me jump. But it wasn't the accommodations that kept me awake. It was the image burned into my mind, that figure standing beside my truck, too tall, too thin, moving in ways that defied physics. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the Mackey family photograph I'd found in my cab. The edges were worn, the colors faded to that particular yellow-brown tint that old photos get. I studied their faces, looking for some clue, some hint of what was about to happen to them. But there was nothing. Just a normal family on a normal vacation, frozen in a moment before everything went wrong. I wondered if they'd felt it when they crossed the bridge, if they'd noticed anything strange before it was too late. Around 2 a.m., I gave up trying to rest. I got dressed and walked downstairs. The diner was closed, but I could see a light on in the kitchen. I pushed through the swinging door and found Dale sitting at a prep table, smoking a cigarette and staring at nothing. She looked up when I came in but didn't seem surprised. "Can't sleep?" she asked. I shook my head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see it. That thing on the bridge." Dale took a long drag on her cigarette and exhaled slowly. "You're not the first person to see it. Won't be the last." She gestured to a chair across from her. "Sit down. I'll tell you what I know." I sat, and she poured us both coffee from a pot that had been sitting on the burner for hours. It tasted like burnt rubber, but I drank it anyway. "That bridge was built in 1952, Dale began, her voice low. "The company that built it, Keller and Sons out of Charleston, They lost 3 men during construction. One fell from the scaffolding, broke his neck. Another got crushed when a support beam gave way. The third one, though, that's the one people remember. His name was Raymond Culver. He was working alone one evening, late shift, trying to finish some welding before dark. Next morning, they found his tools, his lunch pail, his jacket, but Raymond was gone, just vanished. I leaned forward. They never found him? Dale shook her head. Never found a trace. Some folks said he fell into the gorge, that the river took him. But the foreman, he told a different story. Said he came back the next evening to check on something, and he saw Raymond standing on the bridge. Just standing there, not moving, staring out into nothing. The foreman called out to him, but Raymond didn't respond. Then, according to the story, Raymond turned and looked at him. And the foreman said his eyes were wrong, empty, like looking into a void. A chill ran down my spine. What happened then? Dale stubbed out her cigarette. The foreman ran. Didn't stop until he reached town. Next day he quit the job and left West Virginia altogether. The company finished the bridge without him, opened it up to traffic, and for the first few years, everything seemed fine. Then the incident started. She stood up and walked over to a filing cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a folder, old and stuffed with newspaper clippings, and brought it back to the table. "I've been keeping track," she said, spreading the clippings out. "Every incident, every disappearance, every strange report. It's been 70 years, and there's a pattern." I picked up one of the clippings. The headline read, "Local woman missing after bridge crossing, October 1959. Another one, family of 4 vanishes near Devil's Span, July 1967. A third, trucker reports ghost on bridge, December 1978. There were dozens of them, spanning decades. "How many people?" I asked quietly. Dale sat back down. 23 confirmed disappearances, maybe twice that many unexplained incidents where people saw something, felt something, but made it across alive. The thing is, Clayton, nobody knows what it is. Some people think it's Raymond Culver, that he died during construction and his spirit is trapped there. Others think the bridge was built on cursed ground, that there was something in that gorge long before humans ever showed up. And some people, like Vern Tolliver, they think it's something else entirely. Something that feeds on the fear and desperation of people who get stuck there. I thought about my truck, sitting in the middle of that bridge, and the figure I'd seen gliding across the metal grating. Sheriff Tolliver said the bridge has rules. What did he mean? Dale folded her hands on the table. The rules aren't written down anywhere. They're things people have figured out over the years through trial and error. Rule 1. Never stop on the bridge. If you have to cross it, you do it as fast as you can. Rule 2. If your vehicle breaks down on the span, abandon it immediately. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to push it off. Just walk away. Rule 3. Never look directly at it if you see it. Keep your eyes down, keep moving, and don't acknowledge its presence. I laughed bitterly. I broke all 3 of those rules. Dale nodded. Yeah, you did. But you're still here, which means something. Most people who see it up close don't make it off the bridge. The fact that you did, that might mean it's not done with you yet. The words hit me like a punch. What do you mean, not done with me? She reached across the table and tapped the photograph of the Mackey family. It gave you this. It put it in your truck. That's not random, Clayton. It's communicating, showing you what it's capable of, maybe warning you, maybe taunting you. I don't know. But it wants you to know it's there and it wants you to remember. I stood up, suddenly unable to sit still. I paced the small kitchen, my mind racing. So, what am I supposed to do? Just walk away? Pretend this never happened? Dale shrugged. That's what most people do. That's what Vern will tell you to do. Cut your losses, file an insurance claim, move on with your life. The alternative is worse. I stopped pacing. What's the alternative? She met my eyes, her expression grave. The alternative is you go back. You try to get your truck off that bridge, and you don't come back. I stared at her, the weight of her words settling over me. My truck represented 12 years of work, thousands of miles, every dollar I'd saved to buy it. It was more than just a vehicle. It was my livelihood, my identity, my future. The idea of just abandoning it, of letting some inexplicable force claim it, made my blood boil. But the rational part of my brain, the part that had kept me alive through blizzards and brake failures and 18-hour drives, that part was screaming at me to listen to Dale, to listen to Tolliver, to get the hell out of West Virginia and never look back. I sat back down. Has anyone ever gotten a vehicle off that bridge, after it's been claimed? Dale was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. Once, back in 1973. A logging truck broke down on the span, engine seized up. The driver, his name was Emmett Finch, he refused to leave it. Said he'd spent 20 years paying off that truck, and he'd be damned if he was going to let some ghost story scare him off. He stayed out there for 3 days, trying to fix the engine, sleeping in the cab. On the 4th day, a tow truck managed to pull it off. I leaned forward. So, it's possible. Dale's expression darkened. Emmett got his truck back. But he wasn't the same after. He stopped talking to people, stopped working. 6 months later, his wife found him in his garage, sitting in the cab of that truck with the engine running. Carbon monoxide poisoning. The coroner ruled it a suicide, but his wife said he'd been having nightmares ever since the bridge. Said he kept seeing something in his mirrors, something following him. The story hung in the air between us. I wanted to ask more questions, but I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answers. Finally, I said, I need to think about this. Dale nodded. Get some rest if you can. Vern's going to come by around dawn to take you north. If you're smart, you'll get on that bus and forget this place exists. I went back upstairs, but I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the empty street, thinking about my truck, about my career, about the figure on the bridge. By the time the sun started to rise, painting the mountains in shades of orange and gold, I'd made my decision. I wasn't leaving without my truck. I knew it was stupid, knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't just walk away, not without trying. Sheriff Tolliver arrived at 6 a.m., just as Dale had said. I was waiting outside when he pulled up. He took one look at my face and sighed. You're not getting on that bus, are you? I shook my head. I need to try to get my truck off that bridge. Tolliver rubbed his face with both hands. Clayton, I told you last night. That truck's gone. There's no getting it back. I stepped closer. Dale told me about Emmett Finch. He got his truck off. Tolliver's jaw tightened. Emmett Finch killed himself 6 months later. That what you want? I crossed my arms. I want my truck. I want my livelihood back. If there's even a chance I can get it off that bridge, I have to try. You understand that, right? You're a working man. You know what it means to lose everything. Tolliver stared at me for a long moment, then muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse. If I let you do this, and that's a big if, you're not going alone, and you're doing it exactly the way I tell you. No arguments, no improvising. You follow my instructions to the letter, or the deal's off. Understood? I nodded. Understood. He walked back to his truck and pulled out a duffel bag from behind the seat. Inside were flares, a spotlight, a coil of heavy chain, and something that looked like a modified cattle prod. We're going to do this in full daylight, he said. That thing, whatever it is, it's strongest at dusk and dawn. Middle of the day, it's weaker, less active. We'll have maybe a 2-hour window. We drove back to Devil's Span, taking the same route we'd fled down the night before. In the morning light, the bridge looked different, less ominous, more decrepit. Just an old structure badly in need of repair. My truck was still there, sitting exactly where I'd left it. No sign of the figure from last night, no sign of anything unusual at all. Tolliver parked about 100 feet from the bridge entrance and killed the engine. "Here's the plan," he said. "We're going to hook your truck up to mine using this chain. I'm going to tow you off, backward, nice and slow. You're going to stay in my truck with me. We're not setting foot on that bridge unless we absolutely have to. Once we get your rig clear of the span, we'll call a proper tow truck to haul it to a shop. Clear?" I nodded. Clear. We got out, and Tolliver approached the bridge carefully, the chain slung over his shoulder. I followed, carrying the spotlight and the flares. The metal grating under our feet made that same hollow ringing sound I remembered from yesterday. The wind whistled through the girders, carrying the smell of rust and river water. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Tolliver reached my truck and crouched down to attach the chain to the front axle. I stood guard, scanning the bridge, the tree line, the shadows under the span. Nothing moved. The only sound was the wind and the distant rush of water far below. Tolliver worked quickly, his hands sure despite the tension in his shoulders. He secured the chain and stood up. "All right, that's done. Let's get back to—" He stopped mid-sentence, staring at something behind me. I turned slowly, my heart already hammering. The figure was there, standing at the far end of the bridge, maybe 100 feet away. In daylight, I could see it more clearly, and that made it worse. It was humanoid but wrong in every detail. Too tall, at least 7 feet. Too thin, like it was made of stretched shadows, its limbs bent at angles that shouldn't be possible, and when it moved, it didn't walk so much as flow, like water poured across the bridge. Tolliver grabbed my arm. "Don't look at it. Don't acknowledge it. We're going to walk backward, slowly, toward my truck. Keep your eyes on the ground." We started moving, step by careful step. The figure kept pace with us, gliding across the grating without making a sound. I could see it in my peripheral vision, getting closer, 30 feet away. 20. Tolliver's hand went to his gun, but he didn't draw it. "Almost there," he muttered. "Just keep moving." We reached his truck and climbed in. Tolliver started the engine and put it in reverse, the chain going taut. My truck lurched backward, its wheels scraping across the metal grating. The figure stopped moving. It stood there, perfectly still, as we towed my rig off the bridge inch by inch. We cleared the span, and Tolliver didn't stop until we were a quarter mile down the road. He pulled over, and we both sat there, breathing hard. I looked back. The bridge was empty. No figure. No movement. Just an old, rusted structure spanning a gorge. But I knew what I'd seen. We both did. Tolliver radioed for a tow truck, giving our location. Then he turned to me, his face pale. "You got lucky, Clayton. That thing let us take your truck. I don't know why, but it did. Don't ever come back here. Don't ever test your luck like this again." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that luck had nothing to do with it. The figure had let us go, which meant it could have stopped us at any time, and that was somehow more terrifying than anything else. The tow truck driver's name was Hoyt Brammer, no relation to the Louisiana mechanic with the same name, just a coincidence that made me uneasy. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with grease-stained coveralls and a skeptical expression that suggested he'd heard every excuse in the book for why someone's vehicle ended up where it shouldn't be. He hooked up my rig without comment and hauled it to his shop in Richwood, a converted barn on the edge of town with a hand-painted sign that said, "Brammer's Garage, we fix anything." Sheriff Tolliver followed us in his truck, staying close the entire drive. When we arrived at the garage, he pulled me aside while Brammer was positioning my rig in one of the bays. "I'm going to level with you," Tolliver said quietly. "I've seen what happens to people who cross that bridge and come back. They think they got away clean, think they beat it. But they didn't. It followed them. It's patient, Clayton. It doesn't need to take you right away. It can wait." I looked at him, trying to gauge if he was just trying to scare me into leaving, or if he genuinely believed what he was saying. His eyes told me it was the latter. What am I supposed to do? Spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder? He shrugged. Some people manage it. They move far away, change their routines, avoid driving at night. Others aren't so lucky. I'm just telling you to be careful. Watch for signs. If you start seeing things in your mirrors, if your truck starts acting strange, if you feel like something's wrong, trust that feeling. Brammer called out from the bay, gesturing for me to come over. I walked across the oil-stained concrete and found him crouched beside the broken tie rod, examining it with a flashlight. "This is the cleanest break I've ever seen," he said, running his finger along the fractured metal. "It's like someone took a cutting torch to it, but there's no heat damage, no warping, just a straight shear." He looked up at me. "What the hell did you hit?" I glanced at Tolliver, who was standing near the entrance with his arms crossed. "I didn't hit anything," I said. "It just snapped while I was driving." Brammer grunted. "Tie rods don't just snap like this. There's always a reason. Wear, corrosion, impact damage. But this?" He shook his head. "This is new steel. Barely any wear at all. It's like something just decided to cut it clean through." He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "I can replace it, but it's going to take a day, maybe 2. I need to order the part from Charleston, and then I need to make sure the rest of your steering system isn't compromised. You got a place to stay?" I thought about the room above Dale's diner. "Yeah, I can make arrangements." Brammer nodded. "All right, come back tomorrow afternoon and I'll give you an update." I spent that night in the same cramped room, but this time I did sleep, though it was fitful and broken by dreams I couldn't quite remember when I woke. Images of rusted bridges, of figures that moved wrong, of roads that led nowhere. I got up around dawn and went downstairs to find Dale already opening the diner. She poured me coffee without asking and set a plate of eggs and toast in front of me. "Vern told me you got your truck off the bridge," she said, leaning against the counter. I nodded, shoveling eggs into my mouth. I hadn't realized how hungry I was. "Yeah, it's at Brammer's getting fixed. Should be ready in a day or 2. Dale studied me with those tired eyes of hers. "And then you're leaving." It wasn't a question. "That's the plan," I said. "Get my truck, finish my run to Knoxville, go home." She didn't say anything for a moment, just refilled my coffee. Then, quietly, "Watch your mirrors, Clayton. Whatever's on that bridge, it doesn't like being defied. You took something back that it had claimed. It's not going to forget that." I set down my fork. "You sound like Tolliver. Both of you keep warning me, but neither of you are telling me what I'm supposed to do about it." Dale leaned in closer, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "You can't fight it. You can't reason with it. All you can do is stay alert and hope it loses interest. Some people, it follows for a few weeks, maybe a month, and then it moves on. Others, it never lets go. There's no pattern, no logic to it. You just have to live with the uncertainty." I finished my breakfast in silence and spent the rest of the day walking around Cutter's Gap, such as it was. The town was dying, had been dying for years. Half the buildings were boarded up, and the few people I passed on the street looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and wariness, like they knew I'd been to the bridge and were wondering if I'd brought something back with me. By evening, I was ready to get out of there, truck or no truck. The next day, Brammer called to say the parts had arrived, and he'd be done by late afternoon. I spent the time checking and rechecking my route, planning the fastest way to get out of West Virginia and back onto major highways where there were lights and people and the normal dangers of the road. When I finally got to the garage around 5 p.m., Brammer had my truck outside, idling smoothly. "She's good to go," he said, handing me the keys. I replaced the tie rod, checked all the steering components, and did a full inspection of the suspension. Everything else looks solid. Whatever happened on that bridge, it didn't affect anything else. He paused, then added, "But I did find something strange." He walked over to the cab and opened the driver's side door, pointing to the passenger seat. There was a photograph lying there. Old, faded, the same one I'd found before. The Mackey family, smiling in front of their car. I felt my stomach drop. "I threw that away," I said. "Back in Cutter's Gap. I left it in a trash can at the diner." Brammer looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Well, it's back. I found it sitting right there when I moved your truck into the bay. Figured you'd dropped it or something." I picked up the photograph, my hands shaking slightly. On the back, in the same faded ink, were the words Mackey family, August 1983. But underneath, in fresh, dark ink that looked like it had been written recently, were two more words. "You're next." I showed it to Brammer. He went pale. "I didn't write that. That wasn't there when I found it." I believed him. I crumpled the photo and shoved it in my pocket. "How much do I owe you?" I asked, my voice tight. He named a price and I paid him in cash, not wanting to wait for a credit card transaction. I climbed into the cab, fired up the engine, and got the hell out of Richwood without looking back. I drove straight through that night, pushing my hours, breaking every dot regulation in the book. I didn't care. I just needed distance between me and that bridge. I made it to Knoxville by dawn, delivered my load, and headed home to Pittsburgh without stopping for anything more than fuel and bathroom breaks. By the time I pulled into my driveway 3 days later, I'd convinced myself that the worst was over. I'd gotten away. The bridge was hundreds of miles behind me. I was wrong. The first sign came a week later. I was hauling a load through Ohio, a routine run I'd done 100 times before. It was early evening, and I was on a rural highway about an hour outside of Columbus. Traffic was light, just me and a few cars scattered across both lanes. I glanced in my rearview mirror to check on the trailer, and that's when I saw it. A figure, standing on the shoulder about a quarter-mile back. Too tall, too thin, exactly like the thing from Devil's Span. I hit the brakes, not hard enough to jackknife, but enough to slow down significantly. The cars behind me honked and swerved around, drivers giving me angry looks as they passed. I checked the mirror again. The shoulder was empty. Nothing there. Just trees and grass and the fading light of sunset. I sat there for a moment, my heart pounding, then eased back onto the gas and kept driving. It was just my imagination, I told myself. Stress, lack of sleep, the mind playing tricks. But it happened again 2 days later. Different highway, different state, same figure in the mirror. This time I pulled over immediately, grabbed my flashlight and walked back along the shoulder searching for any sign of what I'd seen. There was nothing. No footprints. No disturbance in the grass. No evidence that anyone or anything had been there. I got back in my truck and kept driving, but the unease had settled into my gut like a stone. The incidents escalated. I started seeing the figure more frequently, sometimes in my mirrors, sometimes standing by the side of the road as I passed. It never approached, never moved toward me, just watched, waiting. I stopped sleeping well. Every noise outside my truck woke me. Every shadow looked wrong. I started avoiding night runs, taking only daytime routes, but it didn't matter. The figure appeared in daylight too, always at a distance, always watching. 3 weeks after leaving West Virginia, I was parked at a rest stop in Pennsylvania, trying to catch a few hours of sleep before my next delivery. It was around 2 a.m., and the rest stop was nearly empty. Just a handful of trucks scattered across the lot. I was lying in my sleeper berth, eyes closed but not really sleeping, when I heard it. A sound from outside, metal scraping against metal, slow and deliberate. I sat up, my pulse quickening. The sound came again, closer this time. It was coming from the side of my trailer. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out of the cab, my bare feet hitting cold pavement. The parking lot was dark except for a few distant streetlights, their yellow glow barely reaching my truck. I walked along the length of the trailer, shining my light across the aluminum panels. There were marks. Deep scratches running horizontally across the side, about 7 feet up, too high for someone standing on the ground to make. They were fresh, the metal underneath bright and unmarred. I ran my hand along one of the grooves. It was deep, maybe a 1/4 inch, carved with something incredibly sharp. The scratches formed a pattern, almost like letters, but not quite. More like something trying to approximate human writing without understanding it. I backed away from the trailer, my flashlight beam sweeping across the parking lot. That's when I saw it. Standing between 2 trailers about 50 feet away, perfectly still, was the figure. In the dim light of the rest stop, I could see more detail than I ever had before. Its face, if you could call it that, was smooth and featureless except for 2 dark indentations where eyes should be. Its arms hung at wrong angles, bent backward at the elbows. It didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move. It just stood there, staring at me with those empty sockets. I ran. I don't remember making the decision, don't remember my legs starting to move. I just found myself sprinting back to my cab, fumbling with the door handle, throwing myself inside and slamming the locks. I started the engine and floored it, tires screeching as I tore out of the rest stop without even checking my mirrors. I drove for 2 hours straight before I felt safe enough to pull over. When I finally stopped at a truck stop with bright lights and other drivers around, I got out and checked the trailer again. The scratches were still there, but now I could see what they spelled: Devil's Span. The words were rough, jagged, but unmistakable, and underneath them in smaller letters, mine. I called Sheriff Tolliver. It was 4 a.m., but he picked up on the 3rd ring. His voice was groggy, but became alert when he recognized my voice. "Clayton? What's wrong?" I told him everything. The figure in my mirrors, the scratches on the trailer, the message. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "It's marked you. That's what the scratches mean. You're not getting away from this, Clayton. Not by running. Not by changing routes, it's claimed you." My voice cracked. "What do I do?" Tolliver sighed, a heavy, defeated sound. "I don't know. I've never known anyone who got marked and survived long term. Most people, they disappear within a few months, just vanish one day while they're on the road. We find their trucks abandoned, sometimes on bridges, sometimes on random stretches of highway, but the drivers are gone." I felt my world collapsing. There has to be something, some way to stop it. Tolliver was quiet again, then said, "There might be one way. It's not guaranteed, and it's dangerous, but it's the only thing I've heard of that's worked. You have to go back to Devil's Span, back to where it claimed you, and you have to give it something in return. An offering, a trade, something it values." I laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. What could I possibly give it? Tolliver's voice was grave. "I don't know, but you need to figure it out. because if you don't, you're not going to last much longer. I hung up and sat in my truck, staring at nothing, my mind racing. Go back to the bridge. Give it an offering. The words echoed in my head, but I couldn't make sense of them. What did something like that want? What could I possibly trade that would make it let me go? I spent the next week trying to work, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy, but it was impossible. The figure appeared more frequently now, sometimes multiple times a day. It was getting bolder, appearing closer, staying visible longer. Twice, I saw it standing directly in the road ahead of me, forcing me to swerve. Other drivers must have thought I was drunk or having a medical emergency, the way my truck wove across lanes. My dispatcher started asking questions. Was I okay? Was I on something? Did I need time off? I lied, said I was fine, just tired. But I knew I was running out of time. The figure was closing in, and soon it wouldn't just be watching anymore. Soon it would take what it believed was owed. 10 days after the scratches appeared on my trailer, I made my decision. I plotted a route back to West Virginia, back to Devil's Span. I didn't know what I was going to do when I got there, didn't have a plan, but I knew I couldn't keep running. Whatever this thing wanted, I was going to face it. The drive back felt longer than it should have. Every mile stretched out, time moving in strange ways like the road itself was trying to prevent me from reaching my destination. But I pushed through, and finally, 3 days later, I saw the familiar turnoff that led to the bridge. The sun was setting as I approached, the sky turning that deep purple gray that comes right before full dark. Devil's Span looked exactly as I remembered it. Old, rusted, dangerous. I pulled my truck to a stop about 50 feet from the entrance and killed the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no birds, no sound of water from the gorge below. Just emptiness. I climbed out of the cab and walked to the edge of the bridge. The metal grating stretched out before me, disappearing into the growing darkness. I could feel it watching me, waiting to see what I would do. I pulled the crumpled photograph from my pocket, the one of the Mackey family with "You're Next" written on the back, and held it up. "I'm here," I said, my voice sounding small and insignificant against the vast silence. "I came back like you wanted. What do you want from me?" Nothing happened. The bridge remained still, empty. Then, slowly, I felt the temperature drop. My breath came out in visible puffs, and frost began to form on the metal railing beside me. The figure appeared at the far end of the bridge, standing perfectly still. I walked forward, my legs shaking but my resolve steady. I reached the center of the span and stopped. The figure glided toward me, closing the distance until it was maybe 10 feet away. Up close, it was even more wrong than I'd thought. Not just tall and thin, but hollow somehow, like looking at a three-dimensional shadow. It raised one arm, the limb bending at impossible angles and pointed at me. Then it spoke, not with words, not with sound, but directly into my mind. A voice like grinding metal and rushing water, ancient and patient and utterly inhuman. "You took what was mine." I swallowed hard. "I took my truck, my livelihood. I needed it." The voice came again, colder this time. "Everything on this bridge belongs to me. You violated the agreement." I didn't know what agreement it meant, but I understood now. The bridge had rules, and I'd broken them. By coming back for my truck, by defying it, I'd created a debt, and now it wanted payment. "What do you want?" I asked. The figure tilted its head, that smooth, featureless face somehow conveying consideration. "A life for a life, a crossing for a crossing." You took something from me. Now I take something from you. I felt cold dread settle over me. You want me to die here? Is that what you want? The figure didn't respond immediately. Then, not death, something more. A bond. You will carry me. Wherever you go, I go. Every bridge you cross, I cross. Every road you travel, I travel. You are mine now, until the debt is paid. I understood then what Tolliver had meant. The figure didn't just want to kill me. It wanted to possess me, to use me as a vessel for crossing back into the world. Every bridge I drove across would become another devil's span. Every trucker who crossed my path would be at risk. I would become the thing I'd been running from. No, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I won't let you do that. The figure moved closer, and I could feel the cold radiating from it, freezing the air in my lungs. You have no choice. The debt will be paid. I took a step back, my mind racing. Then I remembered what Tolliver had said. An offering, a trade, something it values. I pulled out my logbook, the one I'd been keeping for 12 years. Every mile, every load, every road I'd traveled was recorded in those pages. It was more than just a legal requirement. It was my entire career, my life on the road, documented in fading ink. I held it up. This, I said, my roads, my miles, take them instead. Let me go, and I'll never drive truck again. I'll never cross another bridge. The road will be yours, not mine. The figure stopped moving. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then it reached out, and the logbook was pulled from my hands by an invisible force. The pages flipped open, and I watched as the ink began to fade, the words dissolving like they were being erased by an unseen hand. Within seconds, the entire logbook was blank, just empty pages. The figure's voice came one last time, quieter now, almost satisfied. Agreed. The debt is paid. But remember, Clayton Reddick, if you break this agreement, if you drive again, the bond will form, and next time there will be no trade. The cold lifted. The figure faded, not walking away, but simply dissolving into the air like morning mist. I stood there on the bridge, holding my empty logbook, shaking from adrenaline and relief and loss. I walked back to my truck, climbed into the cab one last time, and drove off Devil's Span. I didn't look in the mirrors. That was 8 months ago. I sold my truck 2 weeks after leaving West Virginia. Got a job at a distribution center in Pittsburgh, day shift, loading and unloading pallets. I take the bus to work. I walk when I can. I don't drive. Not because I'm afraid of breaking the agreement, though that's part of it, but because every time I see a bridge, every time I pass under an overpass, I feel it, that cold, watching presence, waiting to see if I'll slip up, waiting to claim what it believes is owed. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about Devil's Span. I see the Mackey family in their car, smiling as they approach the bridge. I see Raymond Culver standing on the span, his eyes empty. I see Emmett Finch in his garage, engine running. And I see myself, driving across that metal grating, forever trapped between one side and the other, neither gone nor saved. Just claimed. I don't know what happened to my truck after I sold it. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. But sometimes I hear stories from other drivers. Rumors passed around at truck stops and loading docks. Stories about a rig that appears on empty highways, driving too fast with no visible driver. Stories about people who see it in their mirrors and feel a sudden, unexplainable cold. Stories about bridges where accidents happen more frequently than they should. I tell myself these stories have nothing to do with me, that my truck is just a truck, hauling freight for someone else somewhere far away. But deep down, I know the truth. Devil's Span doesn't just claim lives, it claims souls, and some debts can never be fully paid. I've been running freight up and down the West Coast for 19 years, and in that time I've learned that the Pacific Northwest has its own rules. The rain doesn't just fall here. It dominates. It turns highways into rivers, reduces visibility to almost nothing, and makes every bridge crossing an exercise in faith that the tires will hold and the road won't wash out from under you. I've driven through it all. Coastal storms that rolled in from the ocean like freight trains, mountain passes where the rain turned to ice without warning, and stretches of I-5 where the wipers couldn't keep up with the deluge. But I'd never been scared of it. Not until the night I crossed Cedar Creek Overpass. It was mid-November 2023, and I was 3 days into a run from Sacramento to Seattle, hauling electronics for a tech distributor. The load was valuable, but not especially heavy, maybe 16,000 pounds, stacked on pallets and wrapped tight in plastic. The route was straightforward. I-5 north through Oregon, staying on the interstate until I hit Portland, then pushing through to Seattle by dawn. I'd done it dozens of times. The only variable was the weather, and the forecast had been calling for heavy rain all week. I left Sacramento around noon, made good time through the Central Valley, and crossed into Oregon just after sunset. That's when the rain started. Not gradually, not with any warning, it just opened up, like someone had torn a hole in the sky. Within minutes, the highway was slick and gleaming, and my wipers were working overtime just to keep the windshield clear enough to see the taillights ahead of me. I slowed down to 55, turned on my flashers, and settled in for a long, wet night. Around 10 p.m., just south of Eugene, my CB radio crackled to life. The voice that came through was distorted, broken up by static, but I could make out enough words to understand. "This is eastbound Cedar Creek. Anyone copy?" I grabbed the mic and keyed it. "This is Gideon Starnes, northbound on I-5. I copy you. What's your 20? More static, then "Cedar Creek Overpass. Broke down. Need help." I knew Cedar Creek Overpass. It was about 40 miles ahead, a 2-lane bridge that carried a rural highway over a steep ravine. It wasn't on I-5 itself, but it connected to a series of logging roads and back routes that some drivers used to avoid traffic or save time. I'd crossed it once or twice years ago, but never at night and never in weather like this. "What's your situation?" I asked into the mic. The voice came back, clearer this time. "Engine died. No lights. Can't get a signal on my phone. I've been sitting here for 2 hours. Please, I need someone to stop." Something about the voice tugged at my memory. It was male, older, with a raspy quality that sounded familiar. I keyed the mic again. "What's your name, driver?" There was a pause, longer than there should have been. Then, Reuben Calloway. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Reuben Calloway had been a dispatcher I'd worked with years ago, back when I was running regional routes out of Portland. He'd moved into driving himself about 5 years back, bought his own rig, and went independent. We'd lost touch after that, but I remembered him as a solid guy, someone who knew the roads and didn't take unnecessary risks. "Reuben, this is Gideon Starnes. You remember me? We worked together at Cascade Freight back in 16. Another pause, then a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Gideon. Yeah, I remember. Didn't think I'd hear your voice again." His tone was strange, flat, like he was reading from a script. "You're really broken down on Cedar Creek?" I asked. "Affirmative. Sitting on the eastbound side. Engine's dead, batteries drained. I need a jump or a tow." I checked my map. Taking the detour to Cedar Creek would add about an hour to my route, maybe more in this weather, But Reuben was a fellow driver, and you don't leave someone stranded if you can help it. That's the code. All right, I said into the mic. I'm about 30 miles out. I'll come to you. Sit tight. The response was immediate, almost eager. Thank you, Gideon. I'll be waiting. The radio went silent. I took the next exit and followed the signs toward Cedar Creek, leaving the relative safety of the interstate for a 2-lane highway that wound through dense forest. The rain was even heavier here, hammering the roof of the cab with a sound like gravel being poured onto metal. The road was narrow and poorly maintained, with potholes deep enough to feel through the suspension. I dropped my speed to 35 and leaned forward, trying to see through the sheets of water cascading down the windshield. The forest closed in on both sides, thick stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock that blocked out what little moonlight might have been there. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, illuminating rain and pavement, and not much else. I passed a few side roads, unmarked dirt tracks that disappeared into the trees, and a mailbox leaning at a 45-degree angle with no name or number. The isolation was total. No other vehicles, no houses, no signs of human presence except the crumbling asphalt under my tires. After about 20 minutes, I saw the sign for Cedar Creek Overpass. It was a small, reflective marker half hidden by overgrown brush, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. I slowed down and made the turn, following the road as it climbed a gentle grade and curved to the right. Then the bridge appeared, a concrete span maybe 200 feet long, suspended over a ravine that I couldn't see in the darkness and rain. The railings were low, barely 3 feet high, and the road surface was cracked and uneven. I didn't see Reuben's truck. The bridge was empty, both lanes clear, no vehicles anywhere in sight. I pulled to a stop just before the entrance and grabbed my CB mic. Reuben, this is Gideon. I'm at Cedar Creek Overpass. Where are you? Static. I tried again. Reuben, do you copy? More static, then a faint voice, barely audible. I'm here, on the bridge. Can't you see me? I looked again, scanning the length of the span. Nothing. Just wet concrete and darkness. I shifted into first gear and rolled forward slowly, my eyes searching for any sign of a truck or a person. The rain pounded harder, and a gust of wind rocked my trailer slightly. I made it halfway across the bridge before I saw it. A figure standing near the far railing, barely visible in my headlights. Human-shaped, but indistinct, like it was made of shadow and rain. I stopped the truck and grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket. I kept the engine running and the flashers on, then climbed out into the storm. The wind hit me immediately, cold and sharp, carrying the smell of wet earth and something else, something metallic and unpleasant. I walked toward the figure, my flashlight beam cutting through the rain. Reuben? I called out. That you? The figure didn't move. As I got closer, I could see it was a person, standing with their back to me, facing the railing. They were wearing what looked like a trucker's jacket, dark and soaked through, with a hood pulled up over their head. Reuben? I said again, louder this time. The figure turned slowly, and I got my first clear look at their face. It wasn't Reuben. It was a woman, maybe 40 years old, with dark hair plastered to her skull and eyes that were too wide, too bright. She stared at me without speaking, her mouth slightly open. I took a step back, my heart rate jumping. I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else. Are you all right? Do you need help? She didn't respond, just kept staring. Then slowly she raised one hand and pointed behind me. I turned, following her gesture. There, at the entrance to the bridge, was another figure. This one was male, standing in the same position I'd just been, staring at my truck. I raised my flashlight trying to see his face, but he was too far away. What's going on? I asked, turning back to the woman. But she was gone. just vanished, like she'd never been there. I spun around, shining my light across the bridge, the railings, the pavement. Nothing. No woman, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been standing there. My pulse was hammering now, adrenaline flooding my system. I walked quickly back toward my truck, keeping my flashlight trained on the figure at the entrance. As I got closer, I could see him more clearly. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, both soaked, and he was standing perfectly still despite the wind and rain. When I was about 20 feet away, he spoke. Gideon Starnes. His voice was wrong, too deep, too resonant, like it was coming from somewhere else and just using his mouth as a speaker. I stopped walking. How do you know my name? The figure tilted his head. You came because Reuben called, but Reuben isn't here anymore. He hasn't been here for a long time. I felt a chill run through me that had nothing to do with the cold rain. Where is he? The figure took a step forward, and I saw his face clearly for the first time. It was Reuben, or it had been. The features were right, the shape of the jaw, the pie, the eyes. But something was off. The skin was too pale, too waxy, and the eyes didn't blink, didn't move, just stared with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Reuben's gone, the figure said. He crossed this bridge 6 months ago. Engine trouble, just like he told you. He called for help on the CB. Someone came, but they didn't help him. They took him, just like we're going to take you. I backed toward my truck, my hand fumbling for the door handle. Stay away from me. The figure smiled, and it was the most wrong thing I'd ever seen. You can't leave, Gideon. The bridge won't let you. Once you stop here, once you respond to the call, you belong to Cedar Creek. I yanked open the door and threw myself into the cab, slamming the locks. I put the truck in reverse and hit the gas, but nothing happened. The engine was running, I could hear it, feel the vibration through the steering wheel, but the truck didn't move. I tried again, revving higher, and still nothing. I looked down at the gauges, everything showed normal. Fuel, oil pressure, temperature. But I wasn't moving. I looked up and saw the figure, Reuben, or whatever was wearing his face, standing right outside my window. He raised his hand and pressed it against the glass, and where his palm touched, frost spread out in crystalline patterns. You're staying with us now, he said, his voice muffled but clear. You're part of the bridge, just like Reuben, just like all the others. I grabbed my phone and tried to dial 911, but there was no signal, not even emergency service. Just a blank screen that flickered once and went dark. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and tried the CB radio. Static. I keyed the mic. This is Gideon Starnes. I'm on Cedar Creek Overpass and I need help. If anyone can hear me, please respond. Nothing but white noise. Then, through the static, I heard a voice. Not Reuben's voice, but a woman's. Calm, professional, with a slight southern accent. Gideon, this is Hazel Kittrell. I'm monitoring this frequency. I can hear you. Stay in your truck and don't open the doors. I'm coming to get you. I keyed the mic, my hands shaking. Who are you? How do you know about this place? The woman's voice came back, steady and reassuring. I know about Cedar Creek because I've been tracking it for 3 years. I know what happened to Reuben Calloway. I know what that bridge does to people. And I know how to get you out. But you need to trust me and do exactly what I say. Can you do that? I looked out the window. More figures were appearing on the bridge now, materializing out of the rain and darkness. Men, women, some in trucker gear, some in regular clothes, all of them standing still, all of them staring at my truck. Yes, I said into the mic, I can do that, just please hurry. Hazel's voice came through, calm but urgent. I'm 20 minutes out. Keep your doors locked, don't make eye contact with them, and whatever you do, don't leave the truck. They can't get inside unless you let them. Do you understand?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I understand." The radio went silent, and I sat there in the cab, surrounded by figures in the rain, waiting for a rescue I wasn't sure would come. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. I sat in the cab with the engine idling, watching the figures outside multiply. They appeared from nowhere, stepping out of the rain and darkness like they'd been waiting just beyond the edge of visibility. Some stood close to the truck, their faces pressed against the windows, breath fogging the glass even though I knew they weren't breathing. Others lingered near the railings, motionless sentinels marking the boundaries of the bridge. I counted at least 15 of them, though it was hard to be sure in the shifting shadows and rain. The figure wearing Ruben's face stayed closest, standing directly in front of the hood where my headlights illuminated him. He hadn't moved since I'd locked myself in the cab, just stood there with that wrong smile on his face, watching. Waiting. I kept my eyes down, remembering Hazel's warning not to make eye contact, but it was hard. Every instinct told me to watch them, to track their movements, to be ready if they tried something. My CB radio crackled. "Gideon, this is Hazel. I'm 5 minutes out. How are you holding up?" I grabbed the mic, relief flooding through me at the sound of her voice. "I'm still in the truck. There are more of them now, maybe 15, 20. They're just standing there." Hazel's voice remained calm. "That's what they do. They're waiting to see if you'll panic, if you'll run. As long as you stay in the cab, you're safe. The bridge can hold your truck, but it can't force you out, not unless you give it permission." I frowned at that. "What do you mean, give it permission?" There was a pause, and I could hear the sound of an engine in the background, Hazel's vehicle pushing hard through the rain. "The bridge works on invitation," she said. "It calls to people, makes them stop, makes them feel obligated to help. Once you stop and step out, you've accepted its terms. But you're still alive, Gideon, which means you haven't fully crossed over yet. When I get there, we're going to break the connection and get you moving again." I wanted to ask how she planned to do that, but movement outside caught my attention. One of the figures, a woman in a waitress uniform from some diner I didn't recognize, was walking slowly around the trailer. She ran her hand along the aluminum panels as she moved, and where she touched, frost spread across the metal. I watched her circle the entire rig before returning to stand with the others. "Hazel, they're touching my trailer. There's ice forming where they touch." Her response was immediate and sharp. "Don't let them distract you. They're testing the boundaries, seeing how much influence they have. Keep your eyes forward and stay focused on my voice. I'm almost there." I forced myself to look away from the figures and stared straight ahead at the empty road beyond the bridge. The rain hammered the windshield, the wipers slapping back and forth in a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. Then I saw headlights in the distance, 2 bright points cutting through the darkness. A vehicle was approaching from the far side of the bridge, moving fast. The figures turned to look, their movements synchronized in a way that made my skin crawl. The vehicle slowed as it neared the bridge, and I could see it was a pickup truck. Older model, dark green or maybe black, hard to tell in the rain. It stopped just short of the entrance, and someone stepped out. Even from this distance I could tell it was a woman. She was wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shed water like a roof. She walked toward the bridge with purpose, not hurried, but not hesitant either, like she'd done this before. The figures didn't move toward her. If anything, they seemed to shift back slightly, creating a path. She walked right through them, past Ruben's figure, and came up to my driver's side window. She knocked once, firmly. "Gideon Starnes? I'm Hazel Kittrell. Open the door." I hesitated for just a second, then unlocked it. She climbed in quickly, bringing a rush of cold, wet air with her. She pulled off her hat and shook it out, revealing a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a braid and sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything at once. "You picked a hell of a night to answer a distress call," she said, settling into the passenger seat. Up close, I could see she was wearing practical clothes, heavy boots, cargo pants, and that coat looked like it had been through years of hard use. She set a large canvas bag on the floor between her feet and pulled out what looked like a modified road flare. "Who are you?" I asked. "How do you know about this place?" Hazel glanced at the figures outside, then back at me. "I'm someone who's made it my business to know about places like this. There are spots all over the country where the roads get strange, where something happens that shouldn't be possible. Most people write it off as accidents, bad weather, driver error, but some of us pay attention to the patterns." She pulled out a notebook from her bag, worn and filled with handwritten notes. "Cedar Creek Overpass has been active for at least a decade, maybe longer. I've documented 11 disappearances connected to this bridge. Truckers, mostly, but also a few civilians who took the wrong turn or stopped to help someone. Reuben Calloway was number 10. He would have been number 12. She flipped through the pages, stopping on one filled with dates and names. "The bridge uses CB radio to lure drivers. It replicates voices, creates distress calls that sound completely legitimate. By the time you realize something's wrong, you're already here." I stared at her. "That wasn't really Reuben on the radio?" Hazel shook her head. "Reuben Calloway disappeared 6 months ago. His truck was found abandoned on this bridge, engine running, doors open, no sign of him. The official report said he probably fell from the bridge, that the body washed downstream. But I know different. He's here, or what's left of him is here." She gestured toward the figure still standing in front of my headlights. "That thing out there, it's using his appearance, his voice, his memories. The bridge consumes people, and then it uses them as bait to lure others. It's been doing it for years, building a collection." I felt sick. "How do we get out of here?" Hazel pulled out the modified flare and a small electronic device that looked like a modified radio scanner. "The bridge is holding your truck in place using some kind of electromagnetic field. I can disrupt it, but only for a few seconds. When I do, you need to drive, fast. Don't stop, don't slow down, just floor it and get off this span, understand?" I nodded, my hands already moving to the gear shift. "What about you?" She smiled grimly. "I'll be right behind you in my truck. But Gideon, listen carefully. Once we break the field, those things out there are going to try to stop us. They'll move in front of the truck, they'll grab at the doors, they'll do whatever they can to keep us here. You cannot stop. If you hit one of them, you keep going. They're not alive, not really. They're echoes, projections. Running through them won't hurt anyone." I looked out at the figures, at the thing wearing Reuben's face. "I don't know if I can do that." Hazel grabbed my shoulder, her grip firm. "You have to, because if you don't, you'll end up like them, standing on this bridge for eternity, calling to other drivers, watching as more people fall into the same trap. Is that what you want?" I shook my head. "No." She released my shoulder and pulled out the flare, twisting it to activate. "Then get ready. On my signal, you drive." She opened the passenger door and stepped back out into the rain. I watched her walk around to the front of my truck, the flare held high. The figures turned to watch her, their movements slow and deliberate. Hazel stopped about 10 feet in front of my bumper, right next to Reuben's figure, and raised the electronic device. She pressed a button, and a high-pitched whine filled the air, so loud I could hear it even inside the cab with the windows closed. The effect was immediate. The figures jerked backward like they'd been hit with an invisible wave. Some of them flickered, their forms becoming translucent, unstable. Reuben's figure stumbled, his face contorting into something that wasn't human at all, just angles and shadows and rage. Hazel held the device steady, then struck the flare against the pavement. It ignited with a brilliant white light that cut through the rain like a searchlight. "Now!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the whine. "Drive now!" I slammed the truck into first gear and floored the gas. The tires spun for a second, then caught. The truck lurched forward, and I felt the resistance break, like a rope snapping under tension. I shifted into second, then third, accelerating as fast as I dared on the wet pavement. The figures scattered, but not fast enough. I drove straight through where Reuben's figure had been standing, and it dissolved into mist as my bumper passed through it. I kept my eyes forward, both hands locked on the wheel, watching the far end of the bridge rush toward me. Behind me, I could see Hazel sprinting back to her truck in my side mirror. She reached it, jumped in, and her engine roared to life. She accelerated hard, following right behind me. The figures were reforming, trying to block the road, but the white light from the flare was still burning where Hazel had dropped it, and they couldn't seem to cross that barrier. I cleared the bridge and kept driving, not slowing until I'd put at least a mile between me and Cedar Creek overpass. Finally, I pulled onto the shoulder and put the truck in neutral, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. Hazel's truck pulled up behind me, and she got out and walked up to my window. I rolled it down. "You did good," she said. "Most people freeze up or panic. You kept your head." I let out a shaky breath. "What the hell was that back there? What is that bridge?" Hazel leaned against the door, rain dripping from her hat. "Honestly, I don't know. I've got theories. Some places, something happens that tears a hole in reality. Trauma, death, desperation, all concentrated in one spot. The bridge becomes a kind of trap, feeding on whatever falls into it. The more it takes, the stronger it gets." I thought about Reuben, about his voice on the CB, asking for help. Is there any way to save them? The people it's taken? Hazel's expression darkened. "No. Once the bridge has you, you're gone. What walks around on that span? Those aren't people anymore. They're recordings, impressions left behind. The real people, whoever they were, they're long gone." She straightened up. "You should get back on the road. Put distance between you and this place. And, Gideon, do yourself a favor. Don't answer distress calls on back roads anymore. Not in Oregon, not anywhere. You never know what's really on the other end." I wanted to argue, wanted to say that you can't just ignore people who need help, but after what I'd just seen, I wasn't sure anymore. "What about you?" I asked. "What are you going to do?" Hazel smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm going to keep tracking places like this, documenting them, warning people when I can. Someone has to." She pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it to me. It had just a phone number, nothing else. "If you ever come across something strange on the road, something that doesn't feel right, call that number. Leave a message. I'll look into it." I took the card and slipped it into my wallet. "Thank you, Hazel. You saved my life." She nodded once, then turned and walked back to her truck. I watched her drive away, heading back toward the bridge, and I wondered what she was going to do there. Then I put my rig in gear and got back on the road, heading north toward Portland. I kept the CB radio on, but I didn't respond to any calls. I just listened, hearing the normal chatter of drivers passing information about traffic and weather, and I tried not to think about the voices that might be mixed in with the legitimate ones. I made it to Portland by dawn and delivered my load without incident, but I couldn't stop thinking about Cedar Creek Overpass, about Reuben Calloway, about all the other drivers who'd stopped on that bridge and never left. I started asking around at truck stops, talking to other drivers, carefully bringing up the subject of strange CB calls and disappearances in Oregon. What I found made me realize that Hazel was right. This wasn't an isolated incident. There were patterns, stories, rumors that drivers shared in low voices over coffee at 3 in the morning. A week after Cedar Creek, I was at a truck stop outside Salem when an older driver, a man named Herschel who'd been running freight for 30 years, mentioned that he'd known Reuben Calloway. "Good driver," Herschel said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "A solid guy. It's a shame what happened to him." I leaned forward. What had happened to him, officially, I mean? Herschel shrugged. "Disappeared. They found his truck on some back road bridge, but no sign of Reuben. Search teams looked for days, but the river's fast through there. If he went in, he went downstream quick." He paused, then added quietly, "But I heard from another driver, a guy named Leland, that he got a CB call from Reuben about a month after he disappeared. Voice sounded right, used the right call sign, even made a joke about something only Reuben would know. But when Leland tried to track down where the call was coming from, the signal kept moving, like it was everywhere and nowhere at once." I felt a chill. Did Leland report it? Herschel shook his head. "Who's he going to report it to? The cops? They'd think he was crazy. Most people would. But those of us who've been on these roads long enough, we know. There are places where things don't work the way they're supposed to. You just learn to avoid them." He drained his coffee and stood up. "My advice? Stay on the main highways, don't take shortcuts, and if someone calls for help on a road you don't recognize, let someone else answer." 3 weeks passed before I heard the voice again. 3 weeks of normal runs, of keeping to the interstate, of ignoring every CB call that came from an unfamiliar route or an unverified driver. I'd taken Herschel's advice to heart and stuck to the main highways, avoiding shortcuts and back roads even when they would have saved time. My dispatcher noticed the change, asked why I was suddenly so cautious, but I didn't have an answer I could give him. How do you explain that you'd been trapped on a bridge by things that shouldn't exist, that you'd driven through the ghost of a man you'd once worked with? I was hauling a load of lumber from Portland to Reno, a straightforward run down I-5 and then east on I-80. It was early December now, and the weather had turned brutal. Snow in the mountain passes, ice on the overpasses, and wind that could push an empty trailer sideways if you weren't careful. I was loaded heavy, though, about 40,000 pounds, which gave me stability but made breaking a careful calculation on every downgrade. I just passed Medford and was climbing toward the Siskiyou summit when my CB crackled. At first, it was just static, the normal interference you get in the mountains. Then a voice cut through, clear and urgent. "This is dispatch calling any available driver on I-5 northbound. We have a situation at Broken Ridge Crossing. Driver needs immediate assistance. Anyone in the area, please respond." I recognized the voice immediately. It was the same voice I'd heard 3 weeks ago, the same cadence, the same tone. But this time it wasn't pretending to be Reuben. This time it was pretending to be dispatch. I grabbed the mic with shaking hands. "This is Gideon Starnes. I copy your transmission. What's the nature of the emergency?" The voice came back smooth and professional. "We have a driver reporting mechanical failure at Broken Ridge Crossing, approximately 15 miles north of your current position. Can you divert to assist?" Broken Ridge Crossing. I didn't know that bridge, had never heard of it. I pulled out my atlas and checked the area. There was no bridge marked with that name anywhere near my route. I keyed the mic again. "Dispatch, I'm not showing Broken Ridge Crossing on my map. Can you provide coordinates?" There was a pause, longer than there should have been. Then, "Coordinates are not available. The crossing is marked on local maps only. Take exit 47 and follow County Road 12 west for approximately 8 miles. I felt my pulse quicken. This was exactly how it had started at Cedar Creek. A distress call, a location that didn't quite make sense, a pull to help that felt obligatory. I pulled Hazel's business card from my wallet and stared at the phone number. I'd kept it with me, checking every few days to make sure it was still there, like a talisman. Now I needed to use it. I pulled off at the next rest area and dialed the number. It rang 4 times before Hazel picked up. "This is Hazel." Her voice was exactly as I remembered it, calm and direct. "Hazel, it's Gideon Starnes, from Cedar Creek 3 weeks ago." There was a pause. "Gideon, are you all right?" I took a breath. "I just got another call, same kind of setup. Distress call to a bridge I can't find on any map. It's happening again." I heard her moving, the sound of papers rustling. "What's the location?" I gave her the information, the exit number, the county road, the name Broken Ridge Crossing. She was quiet for a moment, then I heard her typing. "Gideon, there is no Broken Ridge Crossing. Not on any map, not in any database. But I have records of 2 disappearances in that area over the last 5 years. Both truckers, both last seen on County Road 12. My stomach dropped. "It's another trap." Hazel's voice became urgent. "Do not go to that bridge, do you hear me? Whatever is calling you, whatever it's pretending to be, it's not real. It's the same thing that took Reuben, the same thing that tried to take you at Cedar Creek. They're connected, Gideon. These bridges, they're part of a network." I gripped the phone tighter. "A network? What do you mean?" She let out a frustrated breath. "I've been researching this since Cedar Creek. I've found at least 7 bridges across Oregon, Washington, and Northern California that show the same patterns. Disappearances, CB calls, electromagnetic anomalies. They're not isolated incidents, they're coordinated." The implications of that hit me like a physical weight. "You're saying these things are working together?" Hazel paused. "I'm saying there's an intelligence behind it. A pattern. And Gideon, I think Cedar Creek marked you. I think it's tracking you, trying to lure you to another location. The question is why?" I looked out at the empty rest area, at the few trucks scattered across the lot, at the mountains rising dark against the evening sky. "What do I do?" Hazel was quiet for a moment. Then, "Where are you right now?" I gave her my location. "Stay there, don't move. I'm in Portland, about 4 hours south of you. I'm coming to you, and we're going to figure this out together. But Gideon, if you get another call, if anything tries to redirect you, you ignore it. You understand?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "I understand." She hung up, and I sat in my truck, staring at the CB radio like it was a snake that might strike. 40 minutes later, the radio crackled again. This time, it was a different voice, female, older, with an accent I couldn't quite place. "Gideon Starnes, this is Hazel Kittrell. I need you to come to Broken Ridge Crossing immediately. I'm in trouble. Please hurry." My blood ran cold. I grabbed the mic. "Hazel, if this is really you, tell me something only you would know. Something from Cedar Creek." The voice came back, and this time I could hear the wrongness in it, the slight delay, the way the words didn't quite flow naturally. "Cedar Creek, the flare, the white light. You remember, Gideon, you have to help me, just like I helped you." I set the mic down without responding. This wasn't Hazel. This was the bridge, or whatever controlled the bridges, and it was getting desperate. It had tried dispatch, and when that didn't work, it had tried Hazel. It knew I'd listened to her before, knew she was the one person I might respond to. I called Hazel back. She answered immediately. "What happened?" I told her about the fake call, about the voice pretending to be her. She swore under her breath. It's escalating. It wants you badly, Gideon, more than it wanted you at Cedar Creek. You didn't just escape that bridge. You broke its hold, and now it's trying to reclaim you. Her voice became harder, more determined. I'm 2 hours out. Lock your doors, stay in a public place, and do not answer your CB. I'm going to get you out of this. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in the rest area, surrounded by other drivers who had no idea what was happening, and I watched the CB radio. It crackled periodically, voices coming through. Some were legitimate, normal driver chatter about weather and road conditions. But others were wrong. A woman asking for help on a bridge I'd never heard of. A man claiming to be highway patrol requesting assistance. A child's voice, young and scared, saying they were lost. That last one nearly broke me. Everything in me wanted to respond, wanted to help. But I remembered what Hazel had said. These weren't real people. They were lures, bait designed to exploit the instinct that makes truckers look out for each other. I turned the volume down until it was barely audible and focused on staying calm. Hazel arrived at 9 p.m., pulling into the rest area in her dark green pickup. She parked next to my truck and climbed out, carrying the same canvas bag I'd seen at Cedar Creek. She knocked on my door, and I let her in. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed with red like she hadn't slept in days, but her expression was focused and determined. "Show me the CB," she said. I turned up the volume, and immediately a voice came through. It was Reuben again, or the thing wearing his voice. "Gideon, I'm at Broken Ridge Crossing. I've been waiting for you. Why didn't you come?" Hazel listened, her jaw tight. She pulled out the electronic device she'd used at Cedar Creek and held it near the CB speaker. The device chirped and beeped, displaying readings I didn't understand. "It's definitely the same source," she said. "Same frequency modulation. Same electromagnetic signature. Whatever's at Broken Ridge is connected to Cedar Creek." She looked at me. "Gideon, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. When we escaped Cedar Creek, did anything touch you? Did any of those figures make physical contact?" I thought back to that night, to the desperate drive across the bridge, to the figures dissolving as I passed through them. "No," I said. "I stayed in the truck. Nothing touched me." Hazel frowned. "Then how is it tracking you? How does it know where you are?" She pulled out her notebook and flipped through pages filled with diagrams and notes. "Unless," she looked up at me suddenly, "your CB. They communicated through your CB at Cedar Creek. What if they left something behind? A marker, a signal, something that lets them track your location?" I stared at the radio. "You're saying my CB is compromised?" Hazel nodded slowly. "It's the only explanation that makes sense. They know where you are because your radio is broadcasting your location. It's like a homing beacon." I reached for the radio, ready to tear it out of the dashboard, but Hazel stopped me. "Wait, if we remove it now, we lose our advantage. Right now, they think they can still lure you. They think their calls are working. But if we use that against them, if we make them think you're coming to Broken Ridge, we can set a trap." I looked at her like she was crazy. "You want to go to that bridge? After everything we just talked about?" Hazel's eyes were hard, determined. "I want to end this. I've been tracking these bridges for 3 years, documenting disappearances, warning drivers when I can. But I've never had an opportunity like this. If we go to Broken Ridge, if we confront whatever's there, maybe we can figure out how to stop it, how to shut down the network." She leaned closer. "Gideon, how many more drivers are going to disappear if we don't do something? How many more Reubens?" I wanted to say no, wanted to tell her this was insane, that we should just destroy my CB and get as far away from Oregon as possible. But she was right. The calls wouldn't stop. The bridges would keep hunting, Keep taking people. Keep growing stronger. And if there was even a chance we could stop it, we had to try. "All right," I said. "What's the plan?" Hazel opened her bag and pulled out equipment. More flares, the electronic device, something that looked like a modified GPS unit, and a digital camera. "We're going to Broken Ridge, but we're going prepared. I've got enough flares to light up half the county, and this device," she held up the electronic disruptor, "I've modified it since Cedar Creek. It's stronger now, with a wider range. If we can get close enough to the source, to whatever's controlling these bridges, we might be able to disrupt it permanently." We spent the next hour planning. Hazel showed me maps she'd created, marking all 7 bridges she'd identified as part of the network. Cedar Creek was one. Broken Ridge was another. The others were scattered across 3 states, but they all showed the same patterns. She documented the electromagnetic readings at each site, the frequencies used in the CB calls, even the time of day when the bridges were most active. It was all there, 3 years of research condensed into a worn notebook. "The bridges are strongest at night," she explained. "Between midnight and 4 a.m. That's when most disappearances happen, but they're also more vulnerable then, more exposed. If we go during the active period, we have a better chance of finding the source." I checked my watch. It was 10:30 p.m. "Then we've got about an hour and a half." We took Hazel's truck. She said it was equipped with modifications that my rig didn't have, shielding around the electrical system, backup batteries, even a winch strong enough to pull us out if we got stuck. We left my truck at the rest area with the CB still on, broadcasting our location. "Let them think you're still there," Hazel said. "Let them think they're winning." The drive to County Road 12 took 40 minutes. The road was exactly as described in the fake dispatch call, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt that wound through dense forest. We passed no other vehicles, saw no houses, no signs of human presence except the road itself. The rain had started again, not as heavy as the night at Cedar Creek, but steady and cold. Broken Ridge Crossing appeared around a curve. It was smaller than Cedar Creek, maybe 100 feet long, spanning a ravine that I could barely see in the darkness. The bridge was old, constructed from wood and steel, with supports that looked like they'd been patched and repaired dozens of times. There were no lights, no reflectors, just the bridge itself silhouetted against the slightly lighter sky beyond. "There," Hazel said, pointing. "On the bridge." I looked and saw them. Figures, maybe a dozen of them, standing in a line across the span, waiting. Hazel pulled to a stop about 50 feet from the entrance and killed the engine. "Remember the plan. We stay in the truck, we activate the disruptor, and we see what happens. If things go wrong, we drive through them, just like at Cedar Creek." She pulled out the disruptor and checked its settings. The device hummed to life, and I could feel a vibration through my chest, like standing too close to a bass speaker. The figures on the bridge reacted immediately. They turned toward us, their movements synchronized, and began walking forward, slowly, deliberately. "They know we're here," I said. Hazel nodded, her eyes fixed on the approaching figures. "Of course they do. We're a threat. We're not responding to their calls. We're not playing by their rules. They don't like that." She turned up the power on the disruptor. The humming increased, becoming almost painful. The figures stopped walking. They stood about 30 feet away, and I could see their faces now, or what passed for faces. They were indistinct, blurred, like photographs that had been left in water too long. Then one of them spoke, not with a voice but directly into my mind, the same way Reuben's figure had at Cedar Creek. "Gideon Starnes, you were claimed. You belong to us." I felt pressure building in my head, a crushing weight that made my vision swim. Hazel grabbed my arm. "Don't listen. Don't engage. They're trying to establish a connection." But the voice continued, growing louder, more insistent. You crossed our threshold. You accepted our invitation. The debt must be paid. I pressed my hands against my temples, trying to block it out. Hazel was doing something with the disruptor, adjusting dials, checking readings. Almost there, she muttered. Just need to... There. She pressed a button, and the device emitted a pulse of energy so strong I could see it. A visible wave of distortion that rippled outward like heat shimmer. It hit the figures and they scattered, their forms breaking apart like smoke in wind. But they reformed almost immediately, closer now, angrier. The voice in my head became a roar. You cannot stop us. We are the roads. We are the bridges. We are everywhere you drive. Hazel swore and turned the disruptor to maximum power. The device began to overheat, smoke rising from its casing. It's not enough, she said. The source is too strong, too distributed. I can disrupt individual manifestations, but I can't shut down the network. She looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. We need to go, she said. Now. She started the engine and threw the truck into reverse, but nothing happened. The engine was running, the transmission engaged, but the truck didn't move. We were stuck, just like I'd been at Cedar Creek. No, Hazel said, hitting the steering wheel. No, the shielding should have prevented this. The figures were surrounding us now, pressing close against the windows. I could see their hands leaving frost patterns on the glass, see their faces pressing closer, features becoming more defined. I recognized some of them. The woman in the waitress uniform I'd seen at Cedar Creek. A man in a flannel shirt. And there, at the back, Reuben Calloway, watching with those empty eyes. Hazel, I said quietly, I think we made a mistake. She looked at me, her face pale. I'm sorry, Gideon. I thought we could stop this. I thought if we confronted it, if we understood it, we could find a weakness. She pulled out one of the flares and struck it. The white light filled the truck's interior, and the figures recoiled slightly. But I was wrong. This is bigger than we thought. Older, stronger. The voice came again, and this time it was speaking to both of us. Hazel Kittrell, you have interfered for too long. You have warned away prey. You have disrupted our gatherings. Now you will join them. Now you will call to others. Both of you. Forever. I felt something then, a pulling sensation like invisible hooks digging into my chest, trying to drag me out of the truck. I grabbed the door handle, holding on, fighting the urge to step outside. Beside me, Hazel was doing the same, her face twisted with effort. The flares, she gasped. Light all of them. It's our only chance. I grabbed the canvas bag and pulled out every flare inside, maybe 20 of them. I struck them one by one, throwing them out the window, surrounding the truck with points of brilliant white light. The figures shrieked, a sound I felt rather than heard, and pulled back. The pressure in my chest eased slightly. It's working, Hazel said, but it won't last. Those flares will burn out in 10 minutes, maybe less. She looked at me, and I saw resignation in her eyes. Gideon, one of us needs to get out of here. One of us needs to survive to warn others, to keep documenting these places. I understood what she was saying, what she was about to do. No, I said. We both get out. We find another way. She smiled sadly. There is no other way. The truck won't move. The disruptor's fried. All we have are the flares, and they're not enough to get both of us clear. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small digital recorder. Everything I know is on here. Every bridge, every disappearance, every pattern I've found. Take it. Keep recording. Keep warning people. Make my work mean something. She handed me the recorder and grabbed another flare. When I get out, when I draw them away from the truck, you're going to run. There's a logging road about a quarter-mile back the way we came. Follow it west until you hit Highway 97. Flag down a car, get to a police station, call someone. But you get away from here, you understand? I grabbed her arm. I can't let you do this. Hazel looked at me with clear, calm eyes. You don't have a choice. Neither of us do. This thing is going to take one of us tonight. Better it's me. I've been hunting it for 3 years. I knew what I was getting into. You're just a driver who tried to help someone. You deserve to go home. She opened the door before I could stop her, and the cold night air rushed in. She stepped out into the circle of flares, holding one high like a torch. "Come on," she shouted at the figures. "You want someone? You want prey? Come get me." The figures turned toward her, away from the truck. I saw my chance. I threw open my door and ran, sprinting away from the bridge, back toward the main road. Behind me, I heard Hazel's voice, strong and defiant, shouting challenges at the darkness. Then I heard her scream. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I just ran. I found the logging road and followed it, stumbling over roots and rocks in the darkness, my lungs burning. I ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes before I saw headlights on Highway 97. I stumbled out onto the shoulder, waving my arms. A car pulled over, an elderly couple who looked terrified of the wild-eyed man who'd appeared out of the forest. I told them I'd been in an accident, that my friend was hurt, that we needed help. They called 911. The police found Hazel's truck at Broken Ridge the next morning. Empty. No sign of Hazel, no sign of struggle, just the truck sitting in a circle of burned-out flares. They searched for 3 days but found nothing. She was listed as a missing person, presumed dead, though they never found a body. The official report said she probably fell from the bridge, that the creek below had carried her away. I didn't correct them. I kept the digital recorder, listened to every entry, read every note. Hazel had documented hundreds of incidents across 7 states, patterns of disappearances that went back decades. She'd been right about the network. The bridges were connected, coordinated, hunting together, and she'd died trying to stop them. I quit driving after that, sold my truck, took a job at a warehouse in Portland. I couldn't be on the road anymore, couldn't risk hearing those voices, couldn't risk another bridge. But I kept Hazel's work alive. I created a website, anonymous, posting her research. I monitored CB frequencies, listening for distress calls that didn't sound right. When I found them, I posted warnings. I became what Hazel had been. A watcher, a warner. It's been 8 months now. 8 months since Broken Ridge. 8 months since I lost Hazel. And last night I got a call. My cell phone, which should be impossible because I've never given the number to anyone connected to the bridges. The voice on the other end was female, calm, with a slight southern accent. "Gideon, this is Hazel Kittrell. I'm monitoring this frequency. I can hear you. I need your help. Please come to Broken Ridge. I've been waiting." I hung up without responding. But I know what it means. The bridges have Hazel now. They're using her voice, her identity, her memories, just like they used Reuben, just like they'll use anyone who gets too close. I should destroy my phone, change my number, move somewhere far from any bridge. But I won't, because someone has to keep watching. Someone has to keep warning. Someone has to remember the people who were taken. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder if Hazel's still in there somewhere. If some part of her consciousness survived, trapped in that network of bridges calling out to the one person who might understand. And I wonder if answering would be brave or stupid. If going back to Broken Ridge would be an act of rescue or suicide. I don't know the answer. But I keep her recorder charged. I keep monitoring the frequencies, and I keep waiting for the day when I'll have to make that choice. Because I owe her that much. I owe her everything. The bridges are still out there, still calling, still taking, and somewhere in that network of stone and steel and something darker, Hazel Kittrell is watching the roads, just like she always did. Only now she's on the other side.